States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. You know what? If you want to come up, you can sit there, just in case you have something to say. If you say it into the mic, then people at home can hear.
It's official.
That's right.
I gotta be careful. It's
So,
on the record.
so first up is the Oktoberfest budget review, and not that anybody needs a reminder, but basically, originally I had asked the FACE committee just to recommit that they wanted to go through this, and there was enough turnover on the committee that we had to reach out and try to find people who would be interested in running the process. And thankfully, Mr. Jared Zerman, who is here, and Francis O'Shea both volunteered to step up, and I very much appreciate that. And obviously, we got folks from the rec department, Maureen DePaoli and Mike Donardo, and RPAC. I see Rick in the back, all trying to help get the process going. As far as I can tell, the only sort of shortfall, if it can be described as such, is that on the day of volunteers, you're still seeking them, but obviously there's plenty of time left for that. But as a consequence of that, one of the things that show in this budget and that I actually asked for was put in their money for people to be retained if you don't get enough volunteers. So I guess a couple of observations, and then I'll just open it up for people to talk about it. I note that I think you don't draw on the 29,000 that we have in the trust and agency account in the context of the budget.
Yeah, well, obviously I was working off the draft that Katie sent,
Fine.
which did not have any of that in it.
Got it.
So we've had a number of conversations. I'm aware that that is sitting there.
Yeah.
But I'm approaching this independent of that.
That's fine. So obviously, we are in agreement that if there's an emergency, there's funds there. This is for way in advance. I mean, I'm telling you this way in advance, but at some point, assuming you actually make the $4,000 profit that you talked about, and there's still $29,000 sitting in that trust and agency account, somebody tell me what you'd like to do with the money. And that includes the rec department as well, because it's not, you can't have a big party for the committee. It's how are we going to apply it? Yeah, the board would be okay, not the committee. But how are we going to use it for the rec department? Because otherwise, that money's going to keep sitting there for several years until we think that there's nobody left who's going to raise an objection, and then we're going to use it for something. If I'm still here, the board will decide how it gets used at the rec department. That was the intention, and so think about it. You can certainly talk to the folks at RPAC too, but and certainly our rec superintendent. That's something to consider.
Keeping in mind, of course, the plans for the stage in Madison Park.
Correct, but this particular money wasn't necessary. I mean, it would be great if that's how they want to use it.
For events, I mean.
Yes, it could be for events.
So I just want to address that, because I've addressed it in a couple of emails to the group and the committee, and I've even made comments to some people who are.
Now you can send them to the videotape.
Not on the committee. So there's two answers to that. The answer today is that I don't care what happens to the money after September 28th. Okay, I am here, I raised my hand, and I am here today to make sure, or to do everything I can do to make the 2024 Oktoberfest happen successfully.
That was my second point, by the way. Can I just interject one thing? Which is that the second question after the budget is, since you have expressed to me and just now that you are here to make sure that Oktoberfest 2024 gets off the ground, and then we'll sit down and think about whether you have the energy to reprise your role, which is fine. So the question I have, and maybe it's a question for you, Larry, or the village, or actually it could be you too, is do we need to create sort of a formal committee with Jared and Francis as co-chairs, just so that they can, dispense funds or have some kind of authority if they need it? And maybe that is run through rec, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, they don't, even as a volunteer committee, they wouldn't have any authority to dispense with funds. They can make recommendations.
Right,
to them, but-
that's sort of what I meant,
So,
I'm sorry.
I don't think I really even have an opinion about it, to be honest with
Okay,
you. If
so it's
if your
not a
group is-
necessity is what you're
Yeah, if
saying?
your group is intact and you know who's volunteering for you, then let them do their job for 1 year or for
Okay.
one event, and then we'll see what happens after
That's
that.
fine, and if you want to call yourself the Rocktoberfest 2024 committee,
Yeah,
That's really
more
what I'm
power
calling.
to you.
Now,
Yeah.
I've got a shout out to Mike who's sitting behind me and Maureen, we're doing whatever we can, and as we talked about in our first conversation, I think we as a committee, we're taking on more than the committee has taken on in past years, but, this is Mike and Maureen's event still. And to the degree that you just raised the idea of spending money or taking in money, which has come up already in the last
Yeah.
24 hours as we start getting sponsorship commitments, Mike's invoicing, Mike's collecting,
Understood.
right? Mike's making commitments to our vendors, to whether it's tents or, bouncy house. So
Yeah.
it is all still, from a transactional perspective, it's a rec event,
Okay,
all right? And I assume that's
That's what it should
that's
be.
fine.
Yeah.
And by the way, as we're talking, if either of you any of you have comments,
Yeah, please.
just, you know.
There's nothing there.
Yeah, and Maureen, if you want it, you're welcome, and
Yeah.
Rick too. So-
Just say Jared's been
Yeah.
great to work with. He's taken on all that stuff. So I'm doing Maureen and I are doing everything
Yeah.
you mentioned. But he's getting us to that point where we could just, drive
So we had
it
a
drive it in
sponsor-
from third.
We had a sponsor email yesterday that they're gonna mail the check tomorrow. And I wrote to Mike and I'm like, that's
To
good
whom?
that- It's good that she apparently knows who to mail the check to, because I don't. So, yeah, everything
Again.
kind of ends up going through Mike.
Well, thank you both. The floor is yours if you want to say anything
Yeah,
more,
no,
otherwise I'll let people ask you
Yeah,
questions.
so that was the near term.
Yeah.
I've brought it up in emails, I brought it up on Monday night when we had our meeting. Through a lot of the conversations I've had, some with some of the people in this room, I've learned what I didn't know the first day I raised my hand, that this question about the longer term role of this committee and the longer term purposes of the funds that the committee generates, assuming that we do generate them, is in fact a discussion that needs to be had. And may or may not be a discussion that I'm happy to be part of.
That's fine.
But it's the beginning of June, Rocktoberfest is September, and so what I've said to everyone, including the people in this room I've spoken to and members of the committee, we're not having that conversation today. Because today, I'm just focused on September 28th.
That's fair.
That's totally.
Certainly.
And we appreciate you stepping in.
And the law, and yes, Larry's given me great insight into, the various things that can happen in this town and the nuances of how money could be spent or what it
Wish
might
you'd
be
done that
spent
for
in the
me.
future. And it was great insight, and yourself as well. I don't have those answers right now, and
It's fine.
yes, it's a conversation that will have to be had. but it's
Okay.
not today.
That's fair. So does anybody have questions in particular on the budget itself? I mean, to me, you tweaked a few things, you added the dollars you needed. Well, no clown, yeah. I'm sure we can, you know what,
Take money out of the slush fund?
if that isn't a straight line, I don't know what is.
I don't know, someone
I'm gonna
brought up
leave it
the idea
alone.
of not having the clown back, and I didn't really care, what,
Yeah,
500 we saved?
I don't feel too bad about it.
There was a clown last year?
It was
So
a
I
really
have a
good
question,
result.
I have a question. I think that, from my perspective, we have making Rocktoberfest happen this year, and that to me is a very limited sort of conversation, and I think, making it happen like this is fine. I think the bigger question, and I think this is a question for us to think about, right? Which is, Rocktoberfest is not really a committee-run event. It's really not like how other events in this town are run. Because, so for example, the Bulldog Committee, they do nothing for that. Not that they do nothing, but they don't, rec does very little. So it's all volunteer labor. We're installing the Bulldogs, we're getting the sponsorships, we're calling for every vendor, we're invoicing vendors, we're collecting the money,
You could
we're,
probably say the same thing for the Pride event.
Yeah.
didn't see it.
I mean, it's very small,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
yeah. So,
Maureen did provide us with a great flag, and
Yeah.
thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
yeah, and the same thing for Juneteenth, right? Until, again, I think from a fairness perspective, there's a conversation to be had about how we, use our resources, because for that event, and I saw the numbers still the same, it's still 10 people, it seems like, being budgeted. The labor cost, the Parks and Recs is about the equivalent of 10 people
Okay.
working the event. Plus Maureen and any of the people who are full-time staff don't count towards that. So really, it's their time, all their time, plus all the people who are budgeted for. So the question, I think, and this is not really a question for you all, right? It's a question for the board, which is how are we going to use resources, and, you know, are we gonna fund all of our events like this, right? So does that mean for Bulldog Gallery, we're gonna have more help, right? So I just think that's a bigger question about Rocktoberfest and the intensity of the village help, which I don't think it was necessarily intended to be, but it somehow morphed into that. So that's the bigger
That's
question.
fair. We may want to, we still may want to do it in October when this is over, because we could get your
No, agreed.
insight, whether you want to do it again or not, about the event itself. But it is a very fair
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, but there is a distinguishing factor that this one generates a fair amount of revenue.
Yes.
The other ones are not
Yeah,
revenue generating.
and
Yes and no, if you look at the budgets. I mean, it depends on the year, right? It depends on the year, but
No, I didn't say profit, I said
oh,
revenue.
yeah, revenue. I mean, yeah, I mean,
Right.
so does the, you know, the Bulldogs for the first year, $7,000 and, you know. And
I got it.
costs
It's
nothing.
just a difference in philosophy.
Yeah.
And how you approach it. The thing that sort of tipped me, it made me inclined to do this was the fact that you've got from past efforts $29,000. Now I recognize that 29,000 doesn't necessarily reflect the cost that went into it, but it's still sitting there at the moment, which is sort of a safeguard for this event.
I don't think the money, I think it's more philosophical,
Okay.
right? It's more about what we're doing with events, and I think, I don't have an issue with Rocktoberfest, I actually like Rocktoberfest. I think it's more of a like, let's be honest about what it is, and is it mostly a rec event where we are saying from a budgeting perspective, we are committing.
Put it in the budget.
Correct, putting it in the budget, like we are committing this amount of labor, we're committing this amount of their time, right? I don't know if you guys properly budget for that, or you just like fit it in. So it's not about the event itself, it's more about how do we think about this event? Is it really mostly a, Parks and Rec event, which I don't think it was intended to initially be, but maybe it's changed into being that. But I think we need to be realistic about that, because, the broader conversation is, as we add other things, are we going to fund them the same, right? That, I think it's an equity question too,
Yep.
like how are we going to spend our money and how are we gonna determine that? And it's not you take away necessarily from Rocktoberfest, but other events cost money too, that are being funded totally by, volunteer labor. And maybe long-term it's not sustainable, like maybe that's what happened with Rocktoberfest,
Yeah, I
like
mean,
that's
I
what
don't,
the
I
point
don't
where
know
it
all the
wasn't
history, I know
sustainable.
some of the history, because obviously I keep saying I've had a lot of conversations, so I know some of the history. All I can say is right now, clearly this is primarily a rec event in the sense that the rec staff plays a role that I couldn't, if rec were not doing this, it wouldn't be happening.
Right.
Right. On the other hand, and again, I don't have any of the background or these other, do you have another event that has generated $50,000 to $70,000 in revenue? Whatever the costs
How
of those
much-
events you're talking about
Well,
are.
how much does, what's the Bulldog, cause that's a newer event though.
I mean, I don't know off the
It's like
top
40
of my
40
head,
45 or 50,000.
in revenues.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
about that.
so,
I was under the impression they only paid $1,000 last year.
well, that's not true.
No, but revenue.
No, revenue, you're talking
No,
about revenue,
revenue,
not
not
profit.
Net, not
Not-
net.
It
not
was
the net.
seven,
You're
it was
right,
seven,
Vic.
it was seven.
Yeah.
Profit was seven, yeah, or its first year, but the revenue was 50.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. It's obviously a costly thing, right, because we're actually making bulldogs and art and,
And look,
yeah.
this is
We're actually making
costly thing
art.
also, we're
Yeah.
Yeah,
hiring
no, no,
bands,
yes, but the,
jumping
right,
houses and.
right, yeah, but
All right, so,
I think though, the funding again, to me, it's not about whether, it's not about what that costs, that's not really the question is how we think of it. Because I think we used to think of it as a volunteer event, and it's not that, it's heavily,
that's fine.
yeah,
So
it's heavily
we'll-
Parks and
we'll-
Recs, which probably affects their budget and their time, and which I think we need to probably adjust that.
So we'll pencil it in for October, and it's certainly gonna come back in the budget process.
Yeah.
You'll have to make decisions about it. Thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah, I think so. I have a question about the
Yeah, I'm
organization,
sorry,
because
go
I
ahead.
know, like, you're not available, Jared, the day of.
Yeah.
Like, who is going to be, like, the point person to organize volunteers and?
So, some of this information, I mean, I've been here before, but
Yeah.
Francis O'Shea, who's my co-chair, at one point was not gonna be here the day of, but he now is gonna be here on the day of. So that's one critical piece of information. Beyond him, it's still a little bit of a work in progress, but there are other people that we are anticipating, and hopefully, I mean, the way, we're sort of looking at it in two parts. What we really need are the lieutenants. We need to make sure that there's 4 or 5 people that are gonna oversee whatever volunteers are there that day, that are gonna set up the schedule of rotation at the different places that we need them. So we're starting to get a little clarity on that. Francis will be here. We're hoping that Mike Smith, who's been involved before, will be involved again. There's a young lady that that Mitch knows well, Stacy Hirsch, who's a good friend of mine as well, who was at the meeting Monday night. I think she will take a role day of. So we're still sort of putting that team together. And then below them, what we need are the people, right? Are the people to stand there for 2 hours at a time or 1 hour at a time and take people's money as they come in or they want beer. And that team, if you will, or that roster is what's gonna take time. Francis seems to feel a little bit more confident now than he was a month ago, partially because he's gonna be here and partially because he's starting to hear back from some of his friends. But yes, as a group, we, including some of the people that I just mentioned, need to spend the next couple of months gathering that group and making sure that on the day of we have, however many people we need to fit those slots. That's where I thought, you know what, because the numbers look pretty good, we're gonna have a line item here so that if 2 weeks out, we suddenly feel like, oh, we're not gonna have the 12 we need or the 15, whatever that number is that we determine. If we have to hire a few people, we'll have money set aside in the budget to do that.
So my experience with Rocktoberfest, do you guys have a sense of how, because I thought there were a lot of volunteers for Rocktoberfest, but then there were still 10 workers of Parks and Rec. So I guess I would like maybe a sense of what the, you know what I mean? I think this would be helpful for you, which is like, what did the paid people do versus the volunteers?
Some of them filled roles.
Maureen?
I'd just like to say that I'm under the understanding that we're not gonna pay 10 people unless we really need to. Like, really depending on volunteers for this, and that was one of my concerns when we were talking about having this, that we need to be guaranteed that we have volunteers to step in that day. Because we can't have 10 part-time people again. I mean, you're defeating the whole purpose. So that's how I feel about it. I mean,
Some of the 10 were union guys. There were part-timers, but I think a lot of, was that staff line union too?
There were
Parks,
some.
yeah.
There were
So
there were
those
definitely
yeah,
union
Like
employees
you're
there, yeah.
referring to, those are ones that are already included in here or separate, like Parks and Rec personnel?
Yeah,
Is
that would
in-
be overtime, yeah.
Okay.
That would probably be 2 guys, and then the rest of that would have been part-time.
And they would potentially have to be paid through the slush fund or?
No, those 2 guys are part of this.
Okay.
And the DPW overtime is a part of this
And
as well.
who's the 10? Like who?
I'd have to go back over the payroll.
I don't mean.
Yeah,
I
it
don't
was,
mean their names.
could be guys
What roles
helping
did
with
they have?
garbage, filling in with other things, the, tents here and there.
Okay.
Gophers, if you would
For
say.
the most part, not the people that are at the admissions tent, at the
No,
hospitality
no.
tent, right? So my understanding is that's where the volunteers that I'm thinking about are the people that are manning those places where people who are coming in are essentially spending money. They're paying to get in,
Yeah.
they're paying to buy their beer, they're paying to take their kids to the kids zone, right? The people that are manning those tables and tents are the volunteers, is my understanding, that, that we're talking about. Now, there is, I understand, the setup day, like Christy Schmidt has played a role.
Yeah.
There is a certain amount of work that goes into, I guess it's probably the day before, the morning of.
There's a lot of work Friday with setup and
Right.
deliveries.
And is that also volunteers, or that's mostly rec people?
The lieutenants, as you would refer, those would be there too, but a lot of the rec park staff and Maureen and I would be there accepting those deliveries.
So it's a mixture. My focus up till now, in terms of the question that was asked about the staff, I'm focusing on the people that are manning the admissions table, manning the hospitality, manning the kids zone area. That's where my understanding is, that's where what used to be the FACE committee, placed their lieutenants and gathered their volunteers and did their work.
Understood, but I think what we were talking about when we were talking about this, right, was like not having it be 10 people from Parks and Rec, right? So I think what probably has to happen, and I, see Maureen, like I do think, right, you've had this conversation, you said it before, you said it again today, which is, I do think maybe what needs to happen is a conversation about what those people did and whether they need to, you know what I mean?
Those being the 10 that you're referring
The
to?
10, yes.
And it will be less than that.
Yes, so, and for example, so even for, let's say, the garbage, I know that like the GPTL has a full event, they're gonna do it at Juneteenth. So that should eliminate any need, they're gonna be, and they were gonna do it last year, they weren't allowed to do it. But I do think is like understanding, so you have that, you're gonna have that volunteer group because they have like a new events
I'm talking
component,
about
clean policy task force.
Charlotte.
Yes, Lisa Antonelli's,
Yes.
that's who does it.
Spent 2 hours with them.
Okay, good. So that'll be a whole volunteer group that will eliminate what you just said about
Right.
paid garbage removal kind of
Is
stuff.
that true? Does it eliminate? I mean, I
Yeah.
get back to Lisa, I mean, she is, one of the things she
No, I don't know
said
about that.
is,
It's not
don't
because they
worry,
sort-
Todd
they-
Smith and
they
I are
sort
like
it.
this.
They,
We
they,
work great
they
together.
organize the bins, they sort the garbage, they take all the compost themselves. So they actually take the compost up to
Right.
Main Street School.
Yeah, we haven't gotten into those logistics with her, but as I just said, she assured me that she and Todd and the DPW are like this, and don't worry, we meet and everything's gonna be good.
We're gonna, you'll have a dry run because of that garbage piece of it and composting piece, because they're gonna do it for Juneteenth.
And Jared's been great. He's been meeting with all those groups, taking
Yeah.
that head on, and that's taken a huge role off of more.
Next thing you know, you'll be running for mayor.
One quick thing, Jared.
I don't even have a response.
Are you still considering shrinking the day a little bit so you have fewer volunteers?
Yeah, we're pretty much committing to the, to 2 to 9, which is a little bit shorter. It's an hour earlier at the end of the day, and I think just a half hour, right?
It might even be the same. I think it might have been 2 last year.
So 2 to 9, in terms of the entertainment, which is sort of guides the hours. It does come up, as Mike's informed me, with regard to applying for the liquor license, because we have to put, I guess, the hours on that, and we're gonna actually go to is it the state?
Yes.
Yeah, right. We're gonna officially to the state call it 9:30, but we're gonna plan to probably have the music end at 9. That a half hour gives us a little bit of flexibility if
For last call.
Right, exactly.
Because I thought that was a great idea that meeting room came up with as a way to
Yes.
take some of the pressure off the volunteers.
Correct.
Because correct. Yeah.
But we also, I don't know, it was Mike or Rick actually might have talked about the flow of people anyway. By 8, 9 o'clock, there's not many people entering the park.
Right.
Right, anyway, whether we stop it at 9 or 10, that doesn't really change very much the attendance or the need for people at the admissions table.
Right.
Apparently at that hour,
Change the alcohol.
who's ever still there is hanging out. No one's really got it. But yes, we're gonna go with 2 to 9. That's the plan, in terms of the entertainment.
And then local bands to save some money too.
Yeah, we're
No headliner.
also leaning towards not having an outside headline band. That we're gonna just go with bands that have some link to our Irvington community, most and potentially all of which will be bands that have played at the event before.
Oh, through Ray, I assume, right? 'Cause Ray knows-
Yeah, Ray is, and Francis is gonna take a big role on music, but yeah, Ray is, I'm leaning heavily on Ray, that's for anything that's going around that stage, it's Ray. Ray's gotten more emails from me than anyone. Yeah. And just one last thing I would say, because I mentioned it when I sent it. So sponsorship is something that I've taken on really personally. My understanding is this was mostly Joe in prior years. This is really all me now. I've reached out to every sponsor we've had in the past. We've already started hearing back from some of them. We are already beyond the 12,000 that's on this budget in front of you. As I said yesterday, someone told me they're sending a check tomorrow. So, really ahead. But the only thing I'll mention to that, because you brought it up, and none of this is done yet, but I have in my head the idea that for a couple of major sponsors, I'm thinking 3 at the most, maybe not even. We're gonna try to do, still just signage, but bigger signage, okay? I'd like to have a sign across the top of the stage. I'd like to have a sign across the top of the hospitality tent. I have a couple of creative ideas, but just in response to some of the things you and I have talked about, those are some creative ideas I have. They're not gonna really dramatically change the equation here, but I'm hoping they'll help push us a little bit higher than
Name the stage after the sponsor. The bands will be appearing on these.
That's correct. That's the idea. The River Spring Health
Yeah.
stage.
That's a great idea.
And the hospitality, you should be so lucky, I shouldn't even say this because I haven't told them yet, the Sunnyside Federal Hospitality Tent.
Got it.
So we'll see if we can make that a reality, but that's kind of the creative approach.
Sounds good. Anybody else? All right, well, there's silence, you should
Yeah.
run for it. Thank you.
Thank you.
If there's anything you need, likewise.
Thank you.
Okay, on down. Next up is a presentation by Connie Kehoe, liaison to Westchester County for the 250th commemoration of the American Revolution and the founding of the United States.
Hi, everybody. This is like being a grandmother, you know, when I spent so many years coming in here, when you're like, you gotta be here, you gotta be here in time.
Is there someone you want
Do
me
it
to,
when you want.
do you want me to promote, just Scott, like, to be a
Yeah,
panelist?
right. There's someone on Zoom who will probably speak at the end, and that's
That's
Scott
Scott, yeah.
Rosenthal.
Great.
And there are some other people that I will introduce, either on Zoom or personally here. But, you know, I know you have a long time of an agenda, so I will try to be quick. And there are some things I can leave you off that you don't need yet. But,
I
is it good?
requested for him to be promoted as panelist, but he has to,
Yes, oh,
he
he
has to
answer.
agree.
Okay,
So,
we'll give him
whenever
15
he-
minutes.
Anyway,
So, this is really, this isn't a planning of this. This is an awareness of something that Irvington may or may not want to get involved in. It's my opportunity to share with you some of my experience because, as you know, I am the liaison to the county for this. And this, just for the public or some of you who haven't been following this, 2026 is the year that marks 250 years since the founding of the country, or 1776. So people remember, if you're old enough, the bicentennial, and that was 200 years. And I had great fun finding this, which is what was done in 1980. And some of you folks, I don't know if Rick is still here, people that, not because of your age, but because of how many people you know from the old days. The only person I found the other day, when I said, were you here in the bicentennial, was Mary Toomey, and I see her name in here. So anyway, there's a lot different about what this 250th commemoration is to be, and this is national and it's state. So I've been both at a state meeting and a Northeast States meeting on this, but this is my own village, so take personal attention to it. And I have been trying to figure out whether there was interest in this at all. So that was my initial kind of reach out. So behind me is Kent Kleiman, and as far as people who are agreeing to at least be involved initially to figure out is there interest and people want to do something. And Scott Mosenthal is somewhere on that Zoom. You can't find him, but if he's not, then he still can be chairperson. We won't fire him, that's for sure. Michael Lombardi and Jess are part of a group that says I will help, as well as Desmond Lyons and also Jennifer Orkin Lewis and Kathy Hansen. So these are people that, it's not a historical society project. It's not a recreation project. It's a community project if it becomes of interest to this community. And I thought what would be fun for me to share some of the things I've seen about things that have gone on across the county over these 5 years that I've been working on this. So yes, that first, are you gonna hit
I
the?
will when you tell me. Yep.
Oh, okay. That was good. It's like, how do we do this? Like, yeah.
Just tell me.
Okay. So I put this slide up first to give you a sense that planning has been going on at the county level for quite a while, and that George Latimer has been very supportive from day one, and he views this as a very inclusive geographically and in terms of neighborhoods and interests and demographics, that will make a strong program initiative for the county. So just recently, I don't do this just by myself. There are about 5 people who are key volunteers, and actually I'm a 501c3, and both Bruce Clark and John Ryan, obviously people that many people here know, were 2 people that started right away with me as being directors of the corporation. We're a New York State charity. This is my current advisory group, and our own Pat Bonamy is over there in a blue sweater. You know Steve Tilley, you might know Natasha Caputo in the red jacket, Ellen Hendricks, Shelley Mayer, Ken Jenkins, Mayor Roach, professors, Millie Milagros Pena, she's the president of Purchase College. So this is a pretty interesting group with professors and mayors and architects, and they have been my advisory board. So next. So this is what has been spawning or happening over these years. Different communities have basically either kind of spontaneously or when they ask me, like, what's your advice or what should we do? There are these, I call them hyper-local initiatives. So North Salem is, I think, even smaller than Irvington. It's a great little place in the corner. They've created this group. Hastings has been doing things for 5 years. The group in the bottom left, besides me, is Rye. North Castle, it's amazing. They are doing, I'm going to be having a photo op with them on Saturday because they've done some new things with signage, and I made a presentation to their board, not that I was the one that made it happen. So local can be different, and it can be this or that or whatever works. So this is a photo from our neighbors in Dobbs Ferry. They have had a parade and program for 17, 18 years called Road to Freedom. And they actually don't have anybody to run that anymore. People that ran it have, I guess, petered out after a while. But it's a good example of something that came out of their particular history. And it is a focus on something which was Washington's troops actually going up Route 9 and crossing over at Verplanks Point on their way to Yorktown, Virginia. I know they went up to go down, but so this is something that could be many communities if you were to keep doing this Road to Freedom idea. Okay, next. That's Dobbs Ferry. This is Hastings. They have done some amazing work by just forming a little group 5 years ago. We partnered with them. I think you all know Dr. Eric Weiselberg at the high school. He is our historian, he's a village historian. He worked with Hastings, provided a lot of the research that turned into these info panels. So you have to go down Route 9 and look on the right at Zinser Park, you pull in there, and they've done events in their parks and I've been in their parade for 3 years now because they do a whole thing with the revolution. Okay, next. Yes, so our friends.
Question?
Well, why don't you hang on, just hang on, hold your question. The next part is, you're over in Hartsdale, Ardsley School District, and this is being restored. It does have a connection to Irvington because the teenager who was a soldier when he lived in Irvington bought this house after the war. This is John Odell, it's called the Odell Rochambeau Headquarters. The French general who stayed here for 6 weeks to help us, that was his headquarters. So it's being restored. By 2026, it will be a museum, and it will be a major international attraction for the French, who are very interested in their relationship as our first ally. Okay. Part of what they do, and it'll way expand, is they're creating, from the artifacts and things that they have, they're creating a museum. So they have a relationship with the Ardsley schools. This was a picture I took when the middle school had this display. And there's a teacher there who is a thespian, does great performances on the weekends about characters. He's actually Major John Andre Spy. But he has a history club, for example. So next, please. Up in Ossining, that's Joyce Cole. She is on my advisory committee, the RW 250 Advisory Committee. And she was interested in expanding her Black History Month work up at the Bethany Arts Community. And so we started talking to her, and we had a great relationship last year. We brought in a visiting scholar about the Black soldiers in the Rhode Island Regiment, and you see a picture of them up there. So that's just another example of the kinds of things going on in the neighborhood. Yes, Tarrytown. Well, Tarrytown is like Revolution Central. They every year, forever, they do things about the Revolution, and I'm sure you've all been by Patriots Park. When I read this thing, when I found 1980, the whole thing, which is supposed to be Tarrytown, North Tarrytown, and Irvington, is all about Patriots Park. Because everybody pays attention to this story. There's a traitor, there's a spy, there are these yeoman farmers who are militia guys. So anyway, it's fascinating, but it's our neighbor and they do great stuff. So with Larry's colleague, and some of you may know Richard Slingerland, he stepped up now 2 years ago and said, well, we love this history stuff. We love the revolution. Our park is right there. How about you do an event there? It was a great relationship. We did this volunteer work. We had a lot of volunteers. We had 1,000 people that came through there. We had a stage with performances. We had maps. We had parking. We couldn't have done it without Richard. And of course, the mayor and the trustees were all supportive, but they felt it really enhanced their community, and they were happy to have that. They have Halloween. This was after Halloween. Go ahead. They have Halloween. Oh my God, do they have Halloween?
No, I said at the event, they had food trucks.
Oh yes, they had food trucks. Yes, they had good food. Yes. But we had to find the food trucks.
Oh.
But it's okay. They had to be registered with the Tarrytown. Yeah. Yes, this is just an indication of something quite different, but we're also doing in Tarrytown. So this is a little preview. There's going to be a press release about this. But if you know the Picantico Center, you know where KICAD is, that's, you know, the Rockefeller Brothers Fund. And they have sought out a partnership with us for this several months exhibit. And there are a lot of things that are going to happen, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, but it's education, it's information, it's an exhibit of authentic documents that are coming from West Point, the New York State Archives, the New York State Museum. So it is like a really big deal. And we're really pleased. Again, it's Tarrytown, but it's, I guess after like 4 years, people knew we had a reputation and they were like, hey, yeah, we want to partner with you guys. Okay. You can all go to it. It's going to be free, open to the public. So back to this. Okay, small groups, local groups. So here's what I found at our historical society. It's on the, they have posters of this. So just look at Irvington on Hudson, 1776 to 1976. Mary Toomey's just some memory of all this. And they rightly focused on, for an Irvington specific focus for commemoration of this time period in history. There was no Irvington. There was no Irvington. There were 4 tenant farms here. And they focused on those. And there's such an interesting history of all those farmers. So they were tenant farms. The Lord of the Manor, the Lord of the Manor was Philip III, and he had 52,000 acres, and they were a little part of it. So Kent should appreciate Dutcher, right? So then I had to look back at the year, Larry. I came up, it was 2017. So for about 2 years, Eric Weiselberg and somewhat with me as well, and some other people, Bruce Cowan and Pat Ryan, we had to figure out on that new Veterans Memorial that everybody loves, and you've got the beautiful brick there, they had to figure out what families had veterans. So these were America's first veterans. And these 9 families, of course, they had many, many kids. But out of those families, there are 40 or 50 people that served in either the militia or the Continental Army. And so we couldn't put all those names on there, so that we figured out this was the way to go. But I hope you've noticed that. Has everybody noticed it? Will you walk on it? Okay. Now, this is so cool. Your Irvington Woods and your O'Hara Nature Center and your recreation staff, I mean, I really didn't have any idea until I went up there on that May 4th day, all the work they did to authenticate the age of some of these trees. So just look at how old they are. 313 years. They are older than the Revolution. So I figured out a name for this. They're witness trees. They're witness to what happened here during the Revolution. Another community I heard about, they were doing this, and that's Rye. So I've been trying to hook up the people up there, and there are some people in Hastings. There's a lot of interest in just drawing attention to the age of these trees. Now, where it goes with this, I don't know, but it's just great. Now, I know you probably all, if you peeked over the fence on Dow's Lane and looked into where the Odell Tavern is on the Montanito property, this is it. Can you figure out what year that is of the photo? I'll tell you, but what would you guess? Just look at the people.
50s, maybe.
I thought that too, 1930. Yeah, right. I know you have to get on to all your exciting parts of your work session, but what happened here, they're witness to so much history. This tavern Don't think of it as just tavern like but, kind of boarding house, stopping for your horses, right on the Albany Post Road. And if you can just put yourself back like you could do in history, you imagine Washington's troops have just been defeated in New York City and they're fleeing north, and New York State has just existed for like a month and a half. It's a colony and now it's a state. It has a little state government, which is called the Committee of Safety. That was the New York State government for a day. They were there and they were communicating with Washington. Then they had to flee further. So not only that, but the young man who was growing up there at that time, who was maybe 19, John Odell, was a renowned guide. He guided Washington, he guided Rochambeau, he was a horseman, he had 2 pistols given to him by Pierre Van Cortlandt. He had a gray horse. He was a really larger-than-life figure. I actually have talked to the Lombardis about this because they live, their Octagon house is on the Odell farm. So anyway, next is something else that happened on the Odell farm. After the Battle of White Plains, the British came back and picked the Odell farm as where they're going to have their encampment. Well, what did that mean? It meant they took the hogs, they took the wheat, they took the fence. There was an enslaved man who was there whose life was in great danger. They wanted him to tell where everything was, and he refused. So he did survive, but there's so many good, real people stories about this revolution, and that's just an example. Okay. That happens to be a picture in Connecticut, sorry. But, so this was the scholar that we just fell in love with. There are book talks there. I'm just giving you an example of the kinds of things that could happen here in Irvington if there's interest. She's an amazing scholar. Her relatives were 2 soldiers, 2 black soldiers who were in the Continental Army. One defected to the British, but she traced with DNA who was who, where they went, and she did all this research. She is a police officer who got a PhD, and she's coming back. We love her. Okay. There are reenactors who are portray some of the persons of color, also indigenous reenactors. Steve Thomas is friend now. He's a musician. He's got the green hat. He's a great musician. And these folks came up to Ossining, and I hooked them up with Joyce, and it was great. So, yeah. So, yes, maybe the most important thing about Irvington and the revolution is that the control of the Hudson River was so critical that if you lost control, you would have trouble winning the war. So here we have our beautiful parks. That's what it looks like now, but ooh, it's fading. That's interesting. Ooh, how did you do that?
I didn't.
Well, that's what you might have seen in 1776, if you could kind of crank your neck down and look out to Yonkers area. So you think about the whale boats and the frigates and the fire ships and all this. This was in August of 1776. So there's much to say about this, but we won't go all into that now. And okay, this is dream. I've been working on bringing some tall ships up the Hudson. In fact, Larry, you heard about this when you went to the county summit. It's still in limbo, but there is the real possibility. There's that some of the tall ships that are expected to be in New York Harbor for July 4th, we could fund, arrange, work out a small 5 or 6 of them to come up the Hudson. And there's your watch party right there in scenic Hudson, and on the Cuomo Bridge, and perhaps dock in Yonkers or Peekskill. There are kids who use programs where they learn about the ship when it's there, and there's just so many possibilities. But I have to say, Governor Hochul has not jumped into this yet. So that's a question of whether or not that will happen. But doesn't matter. We'll carry on, right? And I'm going to finish up. Oh, yes, another really cool thing. I'm waiting for somebody to build this again. This was a submersible in the Revolution that went under the water. It was found after some mishaps near Dobbs Ferry and recovered, but they tried to blow up a British ship by going underwater and attaching an explosive. It didn't work, but it was a good idea. But we can make a new one. Okay. Quilts were very popular for the bicentennial. People made, it's a colonial craft. So it's just an idea that was from Scarsdale. Okay. And the walking tours. Combine recreation, thank you very much, Recreation Department. Combine recreation, education, history, camaraderie. This is on the aqueduct just a month or so ago. Shar serves as the vice president of RW250, and we had like 30 people with her, where she said, okay, now we're on the Odell farm. Okay, what happened there? Now we're on the Dutcher farm. So it's a really interesting way of getting people involved in their very local history. And that's actually where Larry, you were. So the county is committed to this. They have the way to reach out to every municipality. A lot of people know about us now, but certainly not all. So the expectation is that they'll have another summit to keep this awareness going. And it's through the tourism department. So when you want to think about, is it just about education? Is it just about learning history? It is actually about economic development. I think tourism is the 3rd biggest business in New York State. And my partners in the county are the tourism department. So they know, I'm as much history as I am tourism, but I'm very interested in both parts of that, and bringing the world-class events that we can do. We'll bring international visitors, we'll bring, they don't have to all go to Boston or Philadelphia, they can come here. Okay, so the last part is the big ask here. There is almost no ask of you guys, but the first part is, well, I said I have recruited some people, including Kent, who was here. We thought we were gonna have Beatrice, his daughter, but we just didn't make it. Yeah, well, kids, But, Irvington did do a bicentennial. They were involved in 1976. This 250th is a 7-syllable word, semi-quincentennial. So I am expecting that there will be some interest, because I've seen that there is some, and that, as I mentioned, Kent and Kathy Hansen and Jennifer Orkin-Lewis and Desmond Lyons and Jess and Michael Lombardi and Kent, I said Kent, yes. And all who will be happy to take the first steps. But what I'm hoping, the bully pulpit of all of you, will be to make this public, which you do by putting it out there. And I'm thinking that people might be happy to send some email to you, Larry, if they forget how to find me or they can't find this, and say, hey, I'm interested,
Can
I'd
I
like
make
to
a
do something.
suggestion?
Yeah,
Give us a paragraph
of what it is.
and put it into a village email that says, people are
Yeah.
interested in working on this.
Yeah.
You know, and just so that we're not trying to
Yeah,
describe it.
yeah, no, I do this all the time, so it's, describe what we're asking. I mean, I can even, well, if Scott ends up actually on the, and wants to.
I'm here.
Oh, she is, okay. So in that case, besides sending an email to either me or to Larry, saying, yes, I'm interested, I think you should do this, I think you should do it, I can't do anything to help, or I'd love to do this, or I'm interested in that, and you talked about this, and that sounds good. Scott and this little team could look through those people, get in touch with them, see what the possibilities are, and maybe come back to you guys. You know, I think we don't need to be a committee of the village, but we need your bully pulpit, and who knows what we might need. But, so Scott, you want to speak?
Sure. I've been in here been here the whole time.
Oh, good.
So I've heard the whole thing, and then obviously I'd read it beforehand. But geez, gosh, Connie's very persuasive when she called about asking me to be part of this. There was no way I could say no. I've followed the movement on her end and the amount of work she's put in for the number of years, and it's just really impressive. And particularly when she started sharing what some of these other folks have been doing, which you all saw tonight, it was pretty easy for me to say, sure, I'd be happy to be involved. And I've been fortunate enough to be part of the Irvington Historical Society for a number of years as well. So there's a nice overlap there. And then she talked about the other folks on the committee who I'm really not familiar with so well. Some of them certainly. But the fact that they're interested, and then when she talked about the people who could be our consultants or our advisors, you know, the Pat Bonamies and Eric Weisselbergs and the Pat Ryans of the world, it seemed like a no-brainer. So I'm really excited about getting together with folks and seeing if they what ideas we have we can come up with, and I'm looking for obviously the support from the village board. And we hope to get started this summer and obviously be in touch with you all on a regular basis.
Right. Well, that's great. I know enough people knew you, Scott. There are some students out there that, you know, you might be able to convince that I don't know. But in terms of others, you know, I'll see if Kent, do you want to just chime in with any observation? I know you're one with a young child, so.
Yeah, sure. I imagine some of you know me. I am a Kent Kleiman, a resident. So yeah, I've known Connie actually in many ways. I got to know you a little bit on our street, but like in many more ways, I got to know you through all this. Many times I see Connie walking down my street dressed as George Washington. I can't tell you how many times, to be honest. I think my daughter thinks of you as George Washington. And we've attended, honestly, I got to know you through a lot of the events. She's done some wonderful things around Westchester. Like it sounds like you've attended some of them, and we've more than I can count, and they're really spectacular. Like they are very immersive, like with full reenactments. Like you have like stages with performers who like are the characters that they're playing. There were historical figures, and it's wonderful. And I feel like talking to you with the programming you've done, like your organization has like this huge it's like list of things that you guys have done in the past that I'm sure we could like draw from.
Yeah.
So it's not like starting from scratch. It's not a committee that has like no basis to work from. Like you'd have folks who could then talk to an organization that's really quite professional. And I don't oversell it.
Right. I think you should lower your expectations.
It comes across very well.
Yeah.
And I think you're being humble. I think the work you've done has been really impressive. So
I guess, you know, partly, I don't want people to think this is a historical society thing, or it's just, you know, it's no one group within the village. I see this as like multi-generational and business. I mean, I was saying to Larry that the Bulldog thing was so cool that you guys did. I know Arlene, you made some role in it too. I mean, I'm big on events in downtown, and I'm in the river, and so I just see so much potential that I thought I should just come and give kind of a I don't know, a cheerleader thing and say, I'm a resource and you guys can do what you want. Now, I don't know if Michael Lombardi, I think he's on, if you see him and he wants to say something, well, the Octagon House, of course, is a important place. And if he doesn't, that's fine. And also Kathy Hansen, she's, I said to Kathy, between her mother, who's 100, who's lived here, and his daughter, who's 7, I think that's the range that we're looking for. So we'd like it to be something that everybody, could want to do, but, if there's not interest, it sounds like something
if
you
you-
have to do.
I'm sure people would be interested in doing something. It'll depend on what the level is,
Yeah,
that they want to get engaged. But if you send us the paragraph, we're happy to send out something that says to people, here's an opportunity, you got plenty of time to, plan ahead. But, I mean, even something, I shouldn't say as simple as, but something that's not as complex as, the walking tours that you suggested, signage, things of that nature. I'm sure the library could do some things that would display relevant material. So that's the low-hanging fruit.
Yes, it can be, this, it can be that, it can be build a whaleboat, it can be,
That's right. And you are right that there's a commercial aspect to it, a tourism aspect to it.
Yes, there is. Yes, there is. And, it's the more traffic as you move from your businesses, I'm sure we're pleased.
Oh, yeah, for the
Very
bulldogs, yeah.
pleased. So it doesn't hurt to have more buzz around. Now, this is nothing in 2024. I'm doing things in 2024, but 25 and 26. After that, New York State is going to continue on through the 8 years of the war. I am not. I'm done in 2026, but someone else younger can do more if they wish. But I think you get the big bang like you got, in the bicentennial was a year. So we have all kinds of ideas. I will leave, and did anyone else put their hand up and want to,
No, I tried.
Kathy or?
Yeah, she was there, but it didn't
Okay, I don't
come
know
through.
if she doesn't need to say anything. I'm gonna leave you here, some of these, and this is just a bit of a summary. I'll probably take some part of this to say what it is. We have a very large mailing envelope, large compared to a municipality, but people read our monthly newsletter, and that's how we promote other people's things. So somebody in North Salem is doing a fairly small thing, but a lot of people who are in this world of being interested then know about it. So
We
if
also have
any-
a very good social media, it's like constant. I get more
Yeah.
from I get more from your organization than everything else combined.
Wow,
Yeah, it's
so
like,
you read them.
yeah,
I
it's like
know-
every day at least.
I know who opens. I had no idea that MailChimp lets you know, oh, so-and-so opened your newsletter. Cool. I didn't know much about this before all that. So I'm glad the social media is obviously important.
So you want us to
Yeah.
each take one of those?
Yes,
or-
yes, you definitely could, and then you can leave some around, in the office.
Oh, here, we'll pass them around.
Yeah.
That way.
Before I go, if you're not on the newsletter and you wanna be, just take a picture of this.
Is
and
that-
set around.
That's not on there, I can't.
Well, you can get to it by rw250.org, but if you like that instant, success, you can do that.
So Connie, I was gonna say, one of the things I think we can do as a board, is to try to keep, which is related, at least timeframe wise, is to try to keep the enslaved memorial that we're talking about
Yeah.
down on Buckeye Street on the front burner, so that could be something that could be completed by 2026 and become part of the tour, a walking tour, and certainly, at least, I'm sure part of that is contemporary ritual.
Yeah, the part that fits into the revolution itself, that is part of like my mission. The use of that is way bigger, but there is a part of the story of slavery is slavery during the revolution and the soldiers that were defected, or you could say, to the British and those who wanted to fight for the Patriots. So that's a very interesting decision. And then the indigenous people too, who were making decisions about that. So, yeah, that is certainly something. But any other questions, Arlene? You had
It's
started
fine,
to
it's
ask something, and
irrelevant.
I don't know if Mitch or Larry
Sort of
or,
past where we were.
yeah, I know you have to get on to other things. We're good on, nobody's got their hand up, so I guess we're good. So, like I
Okay.
said, this is awareness, this isn't a plan, this is get input, please, you're interested, we need to know who you are, and the thing I remember from being on the board, people would say like, a day before something, why didn't anybody tell me about this? I didn't know about this. Hello?
Yes, you're giving us a couple of years' notice, we appreciate that.
Right, so, yeah, you can do things in 2025, 26, and it can be.
Well, let's see who we can attract to the cause.
Yeah.
If you send the paragraph, I'll get it out right away.
Yeah, good,
Take it from there.
all right,
Thank you very
All
much,
right.
both of you.
yes,
And everybody else, Scott as well.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Plead for volunteers, so Oktoberfest to plead for volunteers.
Yeah, well, that's my job. Help me, please.
I started out with some, I didn't come empty-handed.
That's true,
I
that is true.
started out.
You
I knew
recruited
that
in
was-
advance.
I know what's needed. Don't ask somebody else to, throw the boat. All right, so you guys have these all. What?
Under the mic.
Yes, this I'm gonna study because it's so funny, the people that are in here, I hadn't actually read. And I'm gonna leave these with Larry or with you.
Larry's negotiating our next agenda point. We may have to
For
switch.
your time and interest
Thank you.
in this educational, recreational, artistic, cultural phenomenon.
Yeah, but there may be somebody else who's joining. In which case, we'll just switch to capital budget first.
Whatever.
I know those two are gonna volunteer. Okay.
Is there another
Yeah.
Bowman debate tonight?
Thanks, Ken.
Oh, is that, yeah, I just got, Jeff Clark just said to me, you were just called out by Latimer in the debate. I know the name.
Okay.
He did that the first time, yeah.
Did he say about you?
Yeah, maybe he just resent an old one, but,
No, one of the mayors.
oh, no, nothing, he just said, I know it, I know him, that's all.
Oh, yeah, because he's on there, does he know the mayor?
Yeah, yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
I remember that.
It's like he was trying to pick the smallest towns that
Yeah.
didn't really.
Somebody no one else knew.
Right. It didn't matter.
Well, with early voting, I voted already, so.
So Larry, what would you like me to
I think
announce
we're-
next?
I think we're actually ready for Westchester Power.
Okay.
And it's got to, just take a few seconds to log in and get set up.
Fine.
So just give us a second. Anyway.
All right, well then you want to unlock the door for me? I'll take it.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I just wanted to have that was this issue where.
Yeah, no, I'm really fine.
How did that,
I have like a people.
We don't do contempt service.
Sometimes, like,
Yeah, no, it sounds good.
yeah. Yesterday.
I mean, Nancy's comment there was
Yeah, because I'm a freelancer, I everything I'm 2 weeks, I just copy and paste into Windows.
I mean, I would,
Yeah,
you know, if something comes up between today and tomorrow.
Like to be, I use it, then I use it, yeah.
So you can mess around with.
No. But it's crazy that like I don't miss.
Panelists, so that you'll appear up here and then you can share your screen.
Yep.
So we do it right.
It's like a middle, felt like a middle of the day. It's like 9 pages.
So you should have a message there.
Yep.
Saying, okay, good. All right.
Okay, so this is our update from Westchester Power.
Okay, yeah. Dan Welsh, yeah, we're just getting all set up here, okay. So Dan Welsh from Sustainable Westchester here, so.
Yeah, sorry, it was gonna be known, but he was over at Rye and they went longer than he had planned for. So you're stuck with me.
Happy to have you.
Slideshow. Okay. So we'll try to be respectful of your time. There's a lot of sort of context in here, which I think Irvington just doesn't need to be reminded of. All the climate change stuff. You guys have been amazing performers in that aspect. So sometimes we like to bring that home. You know, the local impacts and all that we're all familiar with. I saw an article the other day that we might be heading towards another electric air event again this summer. Of course, you know, and you've seen the reports that each month is hotter than the rest. State energy plan, great, not quite on track. It's also seen the reports about the wind farms off of Long Island that were supposed to go forward, and then the contracts got canceled, et cetera, et cetera. But with all that, you know, we're still trying to take a positive attitude and look at all the things that we're doing as constructive and ways to move forward to a better economic and environmental situation. Of course, Westchester, one of the big efforts that we've made to come together around this has been via Sustainable Westchester, which for the viewing public is an intermunicipal shared service nonprofit, and with all the members being the municipalities in Westchester and the county itself. And of course, the portfolio programs you folks are all familiar with. You've participated in so many of them and used them towards various certifications and things like that. We're going to talk about the CCA, the electricity supply program today, but you have residents who are in a community solar program and have maybe participated in demand response and things like that. So all part of the portfolio meant to help the municipalities move ahead. Of course, the environmental justice is more and more something that people want to dial into, you know, everything we do, and we're trying to gear up for that. We're staffing up for that. Just a few instances of some events and things that we've done to try and push that ahead. The job event back in April was a great success. We won a big grant from the federal authorities to help other nonprofits with their facilities upgrades. And then we, of course, look at all this as a future-facing thing too, where there's a lot we can build on this platform going forward. Things like opt-out community solar, which is our proposal's been stuck at the DPS for the past 2 years, but we're still hopeful, and other types of innovative things. And innovation is something that we try to dial in and have successfully incorporated in many instances. Of course, the CCA itself was the first in New York State. That image that you see is our Mount Kisco home that's in the courthouse there, but we've put together a project which was also the first of its type in New York State, incorporating both the community solar program, solar install, and directly feeding into a battery-sustained high-speed charging, car charging. And my colleague Michelle, who runs that, is trying to make that kind of a cookie cutter thing so that, if you've got a roof space, and this is about a 70 kilowatt unit or something, it's not huge, you can drop that in. The toughest part was navigating the NIPA Con Ed thing and other innovations as well. So, but we're here to talk about Westchester Power, and even though it's in some sense.
I think we could turn this off, maybe, because it's just.
Sorry to interrupt, it's just really-
It's really distracting.
No problem. Sure. So Westchester Power as the electricity supply program in some sense is not as visible as some of the other things. You're not installing a heat pump or solar panels. It's just kind of there as part of the ambient thing. And yet it's so crucial to the other programs because, again, if you're electrifying your home, you want to be feeding clean electricity and to complete the sort of emissions-free thing. Just again, for folks who are watching real quickly, how does this program come together? We join together as a collective. With that, we then go out to bid for the supply to the energy service companies that are authorized in the utility zone to supply. With that, we award a contract for the renewable energy supply. There's a very important public notification process because this is an opt-out program where you're in unless you raise your hand to opt out, which is easy enough, but it's something that people need to realize. So the important step here is those letters go out and we generally publicize that hey, there's a new contract coming up. These are the rates. This is what you do if you want to change your supply or opt out. So the public notification is really important. And overall, we want to make sure that the consumers are fully aware of all their choices, of which this is now essentially in a community that engages in this, is one more than they had before. Very simply, the goals, of course, are to move renewable energy at scale, because we have to move to scale at this point to get the impact that we need. Again, expanding the number of options that consumers have, and providing, with these fixed rate contracts, it provides electricity cap, which we'll talk about more, no doubt. Doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to save, but it is a very different format than a variable rate, which you don't even know what it is until you get your bill. The impact has been very significant. We remain the largest CCA in the state, and CCAs have grown to the point where they represent 30 to 40% of the voluntary renewable energy market in New York State. You can see this number, it's a big number, who knows what it actually means. So the EPA has a calculator on there where you can convert emissions to things that people actually sort of have a grasp of. So it's equivalent to something like 74,000 cars taken off the road for that year, or planting 5 million plus trees and letting them grow for 10 years. So again, just a kind of a concept. And the DEC has also done a lot of work on the social cost of carbon. This is to say, when we put those emissions out, they're having a damaging effect on the environment, on health, on all these things. And they have done, numerous studies. They have a big white paper manual, essentially, that talks about how to quantify those damages. We plug into that, and those emissions are equivalent to about $40 million worth of damages on a current basis. In terms of the providing clean energy, again, this provides the underpinnings which make all these efforts that much more effective. And in fact, the impact of the program is more than all of these different efforts put together, because it's so pervasive. And that's the point of this slide. Again, just very quickly, prior to having the CCA in place, you had basically the default utility, and then people, if they wanted to, they can go out, they can sign up with an ESCO. Now, with the CCA in place, it does become the new default, but now you have the three options there. And that is also sort of a form of competition now. The ESCOs know that we're here and know that they have at least that as a benchmark for them. In terms of capping costs, this is just a very obvious visual. You've got the variable costs. It does mean that you're shielded from the big spikes or from a future which is very uncertain, and that sometimes works out for us, sometimes not. We'll talk more about that in a sense. So these are the goals. Not sure why that one slid back in there again. There's also additional benefits. You folks are very familiar with the terms of the municipal opportunities here and the grants available. You're a climate smart community, you're a clean energy community. You're at 5,600 points. The signing up for the new contract gets you another 2,000 points. And I just learned this myself, actually. They have a 500-point level for if you're at 50% renewable or above, and a 1,500 point level if you're at the full 100%. Those are actually additive. Didn't know that. I thought it was just 1,500 points. Regardless, you'll be over the next level, which according to their new matrix, at least up until October, you'll be at you can win a $175,000 award from that. And I did ask them, if we sign a contract now, but it doesn't start until November, which is when our date is, do we still come in front of the October? They're going to cut these down, not entirely, but a little bit. And the answer was yes, it's fine as long as you have the contract. The education and awareness is a huge piece. There's the obvious stuff that's very visible, like tabling, but the big numbers are just with the outgoing letters and of course the phone calls. And even if it's a phone call from somebody who is outraged at the program and wants to opt out or whatever it is, we have a conversation with them and they understand more about the program. And if they're looking for other ways to cut their energy costs or something, you can introduce them to the other programming options. So over 8 years now, we've spoken to thousands of people, and we think that's an important value as well. Oops, and I should have pointed out, we're spending more and more effort to try and make sure we're speaking with our Spanish-speaking population. All of our opt-out letters are bilingual, even though we're supposedly, by the rules, we're only required to send to those who, in their data from Con Ed, it says that they're a bilingual household, but we're just sending it to everybody because that data is completely insufficient, And we have bilingual staff who are out there running events. We ran one recently in Ossining, which was just an overall energy opportunities event, all in Spanish, and we're happy to support and work with you on any of those type of things that are of interest. Again, on the consumer choice side of things, it's really easy to opt out. I know every once in a while we hear people say, "Geez, I had such a hard time opting out." Usually that's because maybe they got stuck on the wrong place of the phone tree, or they tried calling a number that was associated with the supplier or something. If they get to us, they're getting a response, or it's flipping over to the call center, and if we get too much at any one point, it flips to the call center over at the supplier. So we're really focused on that. People, the question's always going to come up, why does it have to be an opt-out model? Why wouldn't it just be opt-in? Let people decide. Totally understand that question. There wouldn't be a program if it was opt-in, and we'd just be back sort of where we were before CCAs. And if we're really trying to reach the impact that we have to in order to make these goals, we have to have this type of scale on it. So, and forgot about that animation. And again, just on the philosophical side, you have to understand that there's always a starting point. There's always an opt-out necessity, like if but your starting point normally would be with the utility. If you wanted to do something else, you would opt out. So we like to make that point in that context there. Again, all this adds up to additional empowerment around options and for the residents and for the municipalities. It gives you the ability to be proactive with respect to what's going on in energy in your community. Now, for what is on everybody's mind is that this current contract has not been a high performer by any stretch of the imagination. We've had a significant gap with the utility. We know that. We're not happy about that. we make sure, in fact, with this contract, we sent out an additional mailing, a couple of months after the beginning, just a postcard, these are the rates, just to make sure if people want to opt out, if they don't want to be here and the green thing doesn't weigh out for them, we want to make sure they can do that. But if we also look back at sort of why did we get here, we were on a weird point in history at that point. The war in Ukraine had just lit up, the pipeline got blown up, and the exports from the United States started exploding, and the price over there for the natural gas, which is the key fuel in the industry and dominates the pricing, is like 10 times what it is here. So that's what pulled everything up. At that point, as far as the industry was concerned, they were looking in the future and not seeing anything changing, and we were on an upward curve. We thought we were actually had a chance to sort of stem the bleeding. Instead, a few months later, it was like nothing ever happened, and the rates came back down. So we did get stuck in this. Hopefully, we're not in that kind of environment right now. If you look at it long term, you will see that contract, down to 23, 24 there, is something of an outlier relative to the rest of them. We've never been so far off. We've been up, we've been down. The red is where we're behind. The black is when we're ahead. So if you're taking it in that context, it is clearly an outlier. Another piece of context here we think is important. If you look, we do a survey about 10 ESCOs. It's not all of the ESCOs, because not all of them make their rates public, but it's all the big ones that people are getting the flyers from and getting calls from and everything. And if you just look at the apples to apples against those 100% renewable products, we've always been down at the lowest level. Sometimes the lowest, sometimes not quite the lowest, but down there. So if you're saying, we want to go green, we were pretty good even through this bad contract situation. This is just threw this in there just to re-emphasize that we're talking about supply here. Con Ed, their rates go up too. Sometimes that happens, and people say, "What's going on? Why are my rates going up?" Or their usage just goes up. So we want to make sure again people can distinguish between the delivery part, which is the infrastructure. It's Con Ed getting the power to you, and the supply, which is us deciding where we want the power to come from. And the delivery part is the higher part of your bill. So 2024, you've got a decent amount of traffic, and things admittedly have sort of been shifting a little bit as we go along, as we try to navigate some of the factors here, and so we want to make sure it's clear. First of all, it's good to know or share the news that we are going to be lower than we are currently. Now, when we get indicatives pricing from the market on a regular basis every week or two, and it's definitely lower. The current price for just a plain vanilla power without the RECs for the renewable component is at about 10.3 cents right now. That's today. And so versus the trailing Con Ed average is 9.3 or something. So it's in the ballpark. The RECs also have come down. We're going to speak to those in a second. But of course, this is today. And if we go to bid in 2 weeks when everybody signed up, it can move by then, and we are heading into the summer. So on that basis, though, we're a couple of cents lower than where we are today with the current contract, at least. Now, going into 2025, none of this is meant to be like crystal ball, like we were telling you is going to be one way or the other. But there are realities for 2025, which is where the bulk of the new contract will be. And that is that we were supposed to build a lot of renewables, and they haven't all been built. Indian Point shut down. A lot of these dirty peaker plants have been shut down, and some restarted and shut down. And so there is what the NYSO, the New York Independent System Operator, is saying is kind of a crunch next year. They're assuring us that there won't be any blackouts or anything like that, but this puts pressure on the constraint pricing. There's also the natural gas factor There's been a lot of new building of export facilities. That's the constraint for sending it off to Europe, is the ability to package up, get it on the ships and get it over there. So that's happening. And of course, the temperatures, and everybody knows, the past 11, 12 months, each one of those has been the hottest month of its month in history. And the summer is predicted to be hotter yet again. And the way people are thinking about it is, this is not the hottest June we've ever been in or whatever. It's the coldest of the future. So all those things are pushing. So the point being that, not that we know that rates are, market rates are definitely going up, but to have a fixed rate as essentially a safe haven is not an imprudent thing to do. Again, if it doesn't materialize, if it goes reverse, whatever, people can opt out. So this is the rec question. This is where we get into the weeds and we start to lose people, and much apologies for that, but I'm going to go through it. Anyway, traditionally, we have to buy renewable energy through this renewable energy certificate medium. Why is that? Because a generator dumps power into the grid, and you can't meter that and track it to your house and know, okay, that's from that facility. So what happens is the New York ISO and what they call the New York Generating Assets Tracking System are the sort of New York State accounting for all that. The generator generates it, puts it in the grid, it gets registered, and then that creates this renewable energy certificate, which represents 1 megawatt hour. That becomes the marketable, saleable thing that gives you ownership to that 1 megawatt hour. So this is how in the voluntary market, you go out and you buy renewable power. And there's different classes of these based on the New York State policy, goals for each of those. And we had traditionally only had access to tier 2, which is what they call the maintenance tier. It's primarily the hydro facilities, these are legacy facilities, and it's about keeping them running in the face of, collapsing markets under the pressure of the frack gas boom, et cetera, and to keep the power from, essentially, in that credit from leaking over into neighboring states, because there could be like an arbitrage where Massachusetts finds that cheaper. They essentially buy and import those credits, and they don't have to build the new facilities, we do, so there's a balance of all these things. So our purchase of those things was pushing the market, pushing the renewables, but this is where we were in the market. There's also a tier 1, which represents new facilities built in 2015 or beyond, and that's considered kind of the high additionality new construction. Those had not been available. This year, there is the first year NYSERDA is going to have a sale and make those available. That's the 2025 vintage. So those are out there. That's kind of the behind what the options are for us. If we look at what our original contract was, our default is this 100% renewable with tier 2. We also have an opt-down option, which is this standard supply. There will be no standard supply this time. There's a criteria in the rules which says you can only offer it if you can price it at no more than 5% over the trailing utility average. Given sometimes the market is not going to allow that. If the trailing average was really low and things are moving forward, it kind of doesn't make sense, but that's the way to do it. So there will be no standard offering. The renewable tier 2 up to now has been in a shortage recently. In fact, new contracts with the most recent contracts with NYSEG and the Yonkers contracts had to go to a 50% default because there was a shortage of those. So this is where we were on that count. So I'm going to kind of jump ahead and just say this before the slides come up. So what we're anticipating now is that we want to go ahead and get the base contract signed as soon as possible so that we are not drifting too far into the hot summer when the psychology is such that rates start to push up. Right now, that would mean a 50% renewable contract. But there is this possibility of both the tier 1 and possibly also bring back the tier 2, one or the other. The tier one situation is a timing situation. Now, NYSERDA is not just putting them in a place and saying you can take them anytime. It's a discrete sale where they announce the price in July and then they transact in August. So we don't want to wait until that announcement and then try to put this all together when, you know, given either the price movements and also the timing relative to the start. So our structure here is we go with the base contract and then we put in the documentation an amendment, a simple amendment that says when those prices are announced for the tier one, and or if the timing doesn't work and that pricing doesn't work, the tier two folks are saying now that the hydrology is improved, the demand situation improved. Tier two might be available. So in July, we should know what's available to us. And the documentation provides for an amendment to that base contract where you would sign and then swap out and add the additional 50% RECs to get to 100%. And the question is that going to be adding 50% tier one, which a lot of the municipalities were pretty enthusiastic about as sort of going deeper green. But they do tend to be more expensive. I did hear recently that the tier two have come down a bit. Our current price is like 2.7 cents, but they're down at like 2.2 or 2.1 now. So we'll be balancing all those factors at the time to make a decision. And the latest package that you received, slightly modified, recognizes that with all those different options, we don't want to pin down, is it 50-50 or what the blend is, but rather leave it to your signatory to go ahead and make that decision at the time. Do you want to go forward with it? Here's the pricing. But we did structure it in a way that would say your signatory has the authority to do that, so you don't have to come back for another legislative action. You know, could be late July and August when we got to, make that decision, make the transaction, and then get the letters out, in time for the opt-out period, which starts early September. So that's what we've put in the package there. We've distilled it down. Originally, it was admittedly a little bedazzling. It's 3 options and whatnot. The package that went out today has just 2. One is simply, look, we're just going to go with the 50% now and kind of take our chances. We'll see if later on, we want to sign on. Maybe a timing issue, though, if you try to do it that way. The second, though, is one where we're in your MOU, you're saying that you're authorizing the signatory to go ahead and make that decision for that additional 50% when that pricing is known on those RECs. So giving you, more flexibility in that. And let me just finish this off. So that's the greenest ever. We talked about the pricing. It's going to be lower this time. We don't know how much. And you know what? I'm not going to go through all this because this is basically what I just said. We got the different options here. And this is kind of, again, the schedule where we're trying to get that main contract signed this month. Hopefully by the end of the month. It's obviously coordinating all the different municipalities is always the biggest challenge. We've got 4 that are on so far. We've got Bedford, Newcastle, Croton is signing tonight, and somebody else, I can't remember, but we're at meetings every night and trying to get there,
So given our schedule, Larry, we have to put this next Monday?
Yeah, and it's going to be a challenge,
Yeah,
since I don't think you've had an opportunity to review the documents the way they
I
are.
think it came in today or
Well,
yesterday.
the simple approach,
You
yes.
We'd be happy to have a separate session with your council or anybody here, to kind of go through it. They're not a big change from what they were in this sense. The contract there was only one clause in it which made a reference to this, like, okay, there can be this amendment and you may do that. That was this 4.10 in the exhibits. And we just modified that to make that more encompassing. And in the 50% model, we just said this is deleted, just so they don't have to even think about it, right? So that's the only thing that changed in the actual contract itself. The MOU is the one where,
Only thing that changed from what, our existing agreement?
from the one that was mailed in the earliest package,
Got
which
it.
we, hopefully you had some time to review.
Not this board, I have, but it's,
Okay,
I think it's questionable what, they have to decide what they want to do.
no, of
That's
course,
part of the problem.
of course. Yeah, I think first, this macro level substantively, are you, on board with this kind of approach, or, some other thoughts about it or whatever. But as I say, we're happy at any time to, if somebody wants to meet for a quick Zoom on lunchtime or something.
Our first July meeting is July 10th, that's too late, I take it, from what you just described?
What happens there is, we want to go forward with the main contract clearly.
Yeah, I understand, you need
Yeah.
sub-commitments,
And-
if you will.
One option could be for you, since the main contract is, the format wise and whatever is not any different in terms of what we're trying to accomplish than the current contract, other than it's 50% renewable rather than 100%. You could go with that, and if you were, not yet figured out where you were, maybe relative to this other structure in the amendment, you could say, look, I'll take my chances, and when we get those prices, you can basically just, at that time, authorize the signing of the amendment and do it. We're just giving you a structure which says you're pre-authorizing, so you don't have to have that legislative action,
Right.
That's all.
Are all the communities up at the same time?
Well, we have 3 aggregations in total. Yonkers is on its own, as you're probably not surprised about that. They march to their own drummer. And we have the NICEAG communities, which are up in the, different utility territory. There's 5 towns there. And then rest of Con Ed for us is 24 Con Ed municipalities. And yes, they're all on the same schedule. And it's not that, it is possible we have had people sign under contracts after the initial tranche, but it's risky because if the pricing moves, the supplier is not obliged to bring you in at that price, that would be the issue then.
Have any communities opted out?
Not yet. I won't say there are a couple, and you know one of them at least, because they make some noise sometimes. But nobody has said no. We're out for sure. We're making the rounds, and I think we have 2 communities that had defaulted to the standard, which we always thought was like, oh, okay, but so they're going to have a challenging.
Right, that's not available.
It won't be available to them, so they might go. They could go with the 50% renewable, which I personally think, again, that if you think about that trailing average being at 9.3, those other factors, to have the 50% green available for high 11s. It could be a place that ultimately is not a bad place to be for people. And then you get a little bit of the green, the impact there, or a significant green impact, actually. But they will struggle with their decision, I'm sure,
Look, I've always said from the beginning of this program that despite the misstep of the last contract, the program is a solid concept, because unless the numbers have changed, somewhere between 80 and 90% of customers never make a choice about their supplier. They simply leave it as the default.
Yeah.
My theory, and I've heard others talk about it, is that the whole marketplace is so damn complicated, as you heard tonight. It's so complicated, no one understands it.
Right.
And it's really predatory. The mailers that you get, the promotional rates that you pay attention to for 6 months, and then
Yeah.
you don't pay attention to after 6 months, and you get, screwed over after that. But that type of market is a reason why people don't make a choice. So the idea that you're taking all these customers who haven't actively ever made a choice, or currently not making a choice, and putting them together and bidding that out competitively for a fixed rate, which is great, and it's a fixed rate that you can opt out of anytime you want and opt back in anytime you want. So not only do you have
Yeah,
a fixed
but-
rate, that's if you pay attention.
But I'm saying, it puts the onus on us as a board because people are not opting out. And we're hearing as much, opting out's easy and you can opt out and you can always opt out, but nobody opts out. So, obviously, nobody opts out, but.
Well, no, I wasn't
but
saying, I
it's-
didn't make that statement. What I said is no one's made a choice. Prior to CCA, the statistics were that people did not choose their energy supplier, even though the market's been deregulated for several decades, right?
And
And
have
people
people
were-
been opting out because the rate in the last 2 years has been twice
There's
what
been
on
maybe a
average?
little tick up, but not
So
that
that's my point.
significant.
My
We
point
get-
is people are still not opting
know,
out
they-
and they're paying twice the rate that they would be if it was kinder. And I'm not saying the value that you're offering
And
us.
that's,
And both offering us value
Yeah.
from an ecological standpoint, but also the village now qualifies for other programs and other
Yeah.
grants that can be advantageous to the entire village. But my point is simply that that the onus is on us to make this decision.
yeah, and people may be begrudgingly making the choice that, okay, it's a higher rate, but I'm doing some good for the environment.
That's what
It may not just be complete ignorance that I didn't know, I didn't know it was happening to me.
Yeah, I'd like to think, again, after eight years, that the general level of awareness is, there is something there. Do we still, everyone, I mean, you guys run a village, no matter what program you do, you're gonna get calls about people who didn't know about it,
Is that really?
But
How did that happen?
But, I think that awareness level is pretty darn high today. And that then feeds back into everything else that we're trying to do as well.
So, I'm sorry.
But communication is huge.
No, I was gonna say, I
Yeah.
was just gonna say that, I was gonna say that I think the biggest part of this is the communication piece, because,
Totally fair.
because you can opt out, right?
Yes.
So I think to the extent that, like, everyone's opted in, even if they come and say, oh my God, I don't know, right? The good thing is that at any point, people can opt out, then I think in that sense,
The risk
even
is
for people
lessened.
who are really upset about it, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's like, okay, you can get out, and I think that's important,
Yeah.
right? That you're not stuck for a year, you're not stuck, because then that would be, I think, a different conversation.
Yeah, I like to think that a lot of the folks who call and who are, in that situation where they didn't know or whatever, and they started that conversation in a bad mood, I like to say that there's not infrequently where when we laid it all out for them, they say, okay, I understand, what the purpose is, I still want to opt out, but I get it, and, so at least we kind of.
I mean, my inclination would be, I don't even know if I'll be describing this right, but trying to capture it from what you had said, to go with I guess it's 50% tier 2 with the option to shift to, the 100% mix of tier 1 and tier 2. And,
Right, without,
Without another legislative action.
right, well, and I'm not that worried about the second legislative action, because if you're right, and I can just adopt the amendment when you come and say, I can give you the 100% instead of 50%, that doesn't bother me that much, but I don't think it hurts me up front to say it. Although, let me ask the question a little differently.
Sure.
Is it possible that when you bring us hey, we've decided to accept your decision to exercise this option, the pricing is different when you mix tier 1, tier 2, correct?
Well, whatever it is we're bringing you, we'll say this is the pricing that's coming in. So if it's, for example, we got tier 1 came in at 3.1 cents. The tier 2 is 2.2. November and December, because they're not 2025, they have to be tier 2. It all comes to about a 42, 58 mix. That blend yields a price of 13 cents per kilowatt hour. That'll be what your making a decision on at that point.
So, put differently, what we're approving up front is the 50% tier one, sorry,
Tier two.
50% tier two, and we have the option that is, we can exercise at a point in time when we
Correct.
come with that price, that I would take.
Correct, so if that doesn't go forward, you'll have, at least you'll be still doing something on the green front.
Yeah.
You'll have authorized your signatory to go ahead, so you don't have to have a, they may check in with you as they, as it does normally, whatever, and say, hey, we got this. But you don't have to have a session and go through it again, The
And
other
these
option,
contracts cover, it's a one-year term, correct?
it's probably gonna be a one-year
So
term.
we'll see you next year.
We're seeing, yeah.
Yeah, this last one was 2 years, so it's not always 1 year. It's
Okay.
been
No, it's
18 months,
not,
or it's been 10.
But we're seeing a gap of over a half cent to go to that next year. Now, it's not that I haven't been told by interested people that for a half cent, you might want to lock in for the
Yeah, I
next
get
year.
it.
But right now, the sentiment from the current stress on the contract, we want to try to.
Well,
find
when
the
you can
best.
predict the future with certainty, come talk
I'll,
to me.
I'll come back to you and we'll all take vacations.
You got it.
Well,
Now, so for ease of review, the format of the current contract, the terms and conditions is largely the same as the future contract is largely the same as the current contract.
yeah, there's
So,
no
and that-
substantive differences. I will say we did, the exhibits in the end are where like the product information is. And we had all this duplication between product one and product two. We took all that and put it in one list. So we reorganized it, but substantively, it's all the same, contract.
You wanna try to do the sprint to get this on, or?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's worth doing it if the board wants to do it. The thing that's not gonna happen is there won't be a full review of the contract in time for June 17th. So you're gonna have to make that approval subject to the final review. of the
Lawyer's
village
review.
attorney.
He's on,
Which
yeah.
can
Yeah,
happen
I'm okay with
in your timeframe. It's just.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
right.
I understand. I'd be okay.
There you go.
It's too,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, she writes us an email that says, oh my God, you can't,
yeah, it's too
You can't do
complicated a
this.
thing to say.
For
That's
what it's
fine.
worth, I agree with John, but also with Arlene, I think it's incumbent on us to reach out to our public to let them know.
And we want to work
About what
with
we're
you.
doing and what.
Absolutely, because my instinct was what yours was, but when you said the onus is on the board, I also was thinking in terms of, I've said this so many times here, is like with climate change, this is a place where we can make a real difference, right? And the fact that there is an opt-out situation, it's kind of the best of both worlds. We can make the statement and say, this is something we can do to help. But, and I say that because I think the vast majority of Irvington residents believe in climate change and want to do something about it. But because what Arlene said, there's not the opportunity, then it becomes our responsibility to tell people, this is what we're doing. If you disagree, you can opt out.
Yeah, whoever comes late to the party can always get out, right?
Yeah, and we want to work with you if you want to, do more and better. I know Noam was saying maybe people should do robocalls even when the contract's going out. Just, watch your mail, make sure.
Have we ever done, like a village email saying, hey, we've just approved this, or anything on this?
I'm sure we have, but I think we, for most of the communication, we relied on Sustainable Westchester Power's communication.
We would feed you some stuff.
Yeah, that's fine.
Put
probably
it,
have
put
to-
it in your Facebook.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, the other thing is that maybe for something like this is where social media would be helpful, right? For
Yeah,
us to put it,
and we're
spread it
happy
on
to
social media.
feed blocks. Now, in terms of doing all this, we want to wait until after the July, August exercise, because we don't want to confuse people that, okay, it's this and it's that.
Prices, yeah.
So that's the whole point of this, is to get all that done, and the residents are not gonna see a change, because it's finalized, now we know the price, that's what goes to the opt-out letter. So that's the point at which we go full court with the communications.
Okay. And that's July?
Well, we're gonna know the
Your
price in
best
July.
guess, yeah.
You're gonna, you sign the amendment then, because the amendment is what the supplier needs in order to go.
Yep.
If it's tier one, to go to NYSERDA and say, request those recs. And August is the transaction, so really, probably it's gonna be August when we're doing all this communication. August into September. The actual mailing would be early September, maybe the 7th, the 10th, because it would go, let me see, this is Con Ed, right? So we're going to November 1st is the start. So yeah, September into October, and then the actual start date when people roll in is their first meter rate date in November. So it's, it's August, September.
Okay. All right, we got a plan.
Okay.
You got the cell, you should take it and run.
I'm happy with
And it's
it.
not just because of our agenda. It's just something I learned from following salespeople around.
No, I really appreciate it, and as you're reviewing or,
We know where to get you.
yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, so then, when you do make your actual resolution, it would be for that option 2, which was the renewable with the, and there's actual, we put draft language in there if that's, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, folks, thank you very
Thanks,
much
Dan.
for giving me a lot of time tonight and giving it serious thought, so. And as I say, if anybody has other questions or wants to meet and just go through some stuff, we're happy to do that.
Thanks for
Thanks.
Okay?
That's good.
Great, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. No, it's okay. We'll get you off here.
Check me out.
Yeah, something like that.
All right. Next up is our capital budget. Give you the chance to sort this out first.
It was timing interesting that this morning Larry and I were at the projects meeting. So it's, see where this is going.
Yeah, we did bring up the capital budget a few times.
Yeah.
All right. I'm gonna bring it up on the screen if you just give me a second here. All right, so I don't know.
Okay.
Well, let me get sharing first, hold on. You just tell me where you wanna go with it. Just give me a second to zoom in. Okay.
So let me ask you some philosophical questions up front. You were kind enough to send me the 23-24, thank you, Dan, 23-24 borrowing. And there, if I understand this correctly, you borrowed $2.15 million.
Correct.
Okay. And now we are looking at, I think it's over $5.362 million. I think that's apples to apples, right? Unless you didn't have water in the 23-24, let's see, DPW did not have water. So there was something more than the 2.15, yes?
Last year was just the 2.15.
Oh, I'm sorry, you do have water, okay. So you got almost a doubling of capital expenditures. So the philosophical question is, excuse me, how do we decide what we borrow for upfront every year? Is it purely need, or are you, and I know, Larry, you have talked about sort of the philosophy of charting up, both of you actually, charting out many, many years. So you're not just like going, okay, what does everybody want this year? I get it, there's planning. But how do we have this big lump this year? Is it just sort of luck of the draw? Or I don't know, I'll stop and let you try to answer a somewhat ambiguous question, but it's one that is helpful to me, particularly if I have to choose between scenario 1 and scenario 2, knowing that there are at least 2 items next year that are $1 million apiece, potentially the fire truck and the stage.
Right. Well, look, I mean, it's hard to characterize or answer that question with just a simple, blanket statement of, we should have timed it out better. Some of it is driven by grant funding, some of it's driven by project complexities. The theater being a perfect example. We probably should have been working on this a year or 2 ago, maybe even more. And because of the complexity of it, we're working on it now and we're paying for it now. So, that coupled with grant funding, like in the case of the culvert monies that we received, leads to lumps like that. I mean, that's the best way to describe
So
it.
some of it, to put it in my words, some of it's opportunistic because you've suddenly gotten somebody saying, I'll give you, I don't know, half or a third of what it'll cost you, and you may move something forward because you can get that.
And you have, you have some leeway with that. You can, obviously, you don't have to apply. You don't know when you're gonna be granted those monies if you do get them.
Yeah.
We've had a fortunate string from that standpoint in terms of our grants, but what that means is that you need to get those projects done. So it's tough looking at some of these expenditures and realizing that you're getting, 30, 40, 50 cents on the dollar on those projects and somehow turning your back on that. It would be irresponsible.
Yeah, well, some,
You know what I mean?
that's assuming, and I think it's a fair assumption, that all of these projects are projects that will have to be done at some point. 'Cause a lot of the culverts, I don't think there's any denying that.
Right. And with the culverts, I think what you've seen over the years, and I know we've talked about this and over the years at length, we did a flood study back in 2011, which very clearly identified where our choke points were. And if you look at the projects of the last decade plus, we've been working at those projects diligently to get them done. Some had grant funding, some didn't. The more recent ones are all being driven by grant funding, which is great. One of the first projects we did was the replacement of the Station Road culvert that
Yeah.
Larry knows well. It's right outside his house there. That one had no grant funding, but it was important enough, at the time, and it was one of the first projects that really, if you're gonna start working on these flood projects, you need to start downstream and work your way up, generally speaking. So, if we didn't do that project, we wouldn't be doing, the Harriman Road culvert project that we're doing now and others along the way, the Downing one as well. So, so it's opportunistic for sure. And we should, look, I mean, some grant programs are better than others. The Harriman Road grant program was a 50% grant, which at the time was leading us to a maximum of about a 1.1 million, almost 1.2 million in grant funding. But that still leaves a pretty significant component that we need to fund. The Downingwood culvert, which is not in this year's capital budget, fortunately, the Downingwood culvert is a much higher percentage. It was 1.4 million out of 1.8 million. So, again,
I got it.
It's been improving. So
Yeah, and my comments don't go to, we have to take, what can we take out? Although I'm sure we could find something if we had to. Because I think that all the projects are well thought out, but how much is left in the fund balance, Katie? 7 million something? Just over 7 million?
Yes, about 7,028,000.
Okay.
That's the unassigned fund balance, so
Yeah,
the
yeah.
portion that
That's
can
what I mean.
freely be used.
So I can't quite tell from what you have, but if you go to what would be page 3 of 24, maybe that's it.
let me just.
Yeah, it's totals by year what I have to pay. You see 1.76 and then 223.
Yes.
And this is scenario 1. Can you tell me what we've done in prior years? The question I'm really asking is, how much debt service can this village tolerate in a normal budget? And I understand that as assessments go up, as, things change, it's a little like the federal government. The more you take and put in the military and the Social Security and entitlement programs, the less there is for the sort of operating, and not that the military isn't an operating aspect, the less that's available for the operating function, the rest of government. So that's my question here. If, historically, maybe my question should be as a percentage, what have we taken from the budget as debt service?
So to kind of put it into perspective, last year's budget, the tax cap will to remain in the tax cap. We were able to raise the tax levy 693,000. Based on this, this would take up about 472,000 of the 693. I mean, assuming, it won't vary too much from
Yeah.
that,
Yeah,
but, that's a big piece of it.
got it. And, does anybody remember offhand what our total budget, this was operating budget?
22
22 million.
million.
Okay. So we're talking 10%. Ballpark, not your less for 24, 25, but going forward, when you lay this on, you're gonna get to 10% roughly for debt service.
Right.
All right, that's not too outrageous. Plus the fact that we have a healthy fund balance. And this one in scenario one uses, how much was it? 374,000 plus the library fund.
Correct.
So I'm sure other people may have comments, but my inclination would be to use scenario one because I already know that I have those two big ticket items layered on next year, and I may want to take some more from fund balance. We'll see how the year goes and whether we end up replenishing a good chunk of this as, depending on what we spend or don't spend, since projects take on a life of their own. You're looking contemplative.
No, I'm just, the reality is, you can, if you use fund balance up front to pay, using a modest amount of fund
Yeah.
balance up front, so a lower amount.
Yeah.
That's all fine, if and when you get to the point of doing your budget next year, and you're still having difficulty with absorbing what that new debt service is and fitting within the tax cap.
Yeah.
You can still apply some fund balance at that point.
Oh, no,
It's harder to do
yeah.
it then because then it's a recurring fund balance, then you've got to,
You mean it's
kinda-
that plus the 370 some odd?
you've got to, you can do it next year, but then you have to be concerned about then having to do it again the following year. So
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
talking 2 years out.
You're right, I
So
have
it's
not put the tax rate at a level that would cover this, in a sense, cover the 374.
Right, exactly.
Fund balance is not supposed to be for recurring items, right?
Well,
Right.
Unless I'm willing to tolerate a sudden leap in the tax rate in a
Well, yeah,
given
of
year.
course. Yeah, no, but I think
It's just a little more shocking.
right, I think the assumption is that the goal that we're shooting for here is to not have those types
Yeah,
of leaps in any given year.
I'm with you.
Yeah, so.
Even if I'm out of office, I'm still with you.
I mean, the one thing I always look at the capital budget as, and I know this is stating the obvious, but I think it's important to remember the philosophy behind it, is that, because it reminds me of being in a co-op, and it's a very similar situation, is that if we pay for something now, the people who live in the village right now are the ones who have to pay for it, even though it's gonna have a life for many years, whereas if you do it as a capital budget item and you borrow and you're paying it off over time, then everybody who's enjoying the benefits of whether it's a fire truck or a culvert or whatever, are helping to pay for it over time. There's an equity to doing it this way.
But the counter, it's not really a counter, but sort of the corollary to that is, then I can pull more into the operating budget from the fund balance, because that's current expenditures
Sure.
on your, using that philosophy.
Except the way to look at the fund balance, that I always look at it is that it's that because the village, because Larry and Katie are operating the village in such a way that the budgets are always correct in the sense that we always have leftover money rather
Yeah.
than falling short. So we're putting that money back in the next year, and usually for things that are not recurring. That's the whole point. Do you see
Yeah,
what
no,
I'm
I'm by corollary, I meant I was in some respects agreeing with you.
Oh, okay.
I'm just,
Yeah.
your argument is, don't do it here, do it on the operating budget, in a sense. Don't do it in the capital budget, if you're gonna draw from fund balance, don't do it in the capital budget, do it in the operating
Because if
budget.
we do it from the operating budget, then it's an assumption it's gonna be for something that's 1 year, because every
Yeah.
year we have stuff that comes up that's 1 year. How many times have we
Yeah.
said,
Now-
this thing, all right, we use fund balance.
And now that I've agreed with you, let me give you the counter. And the counter is that the operating budget, I believe, includes funds to pay debt service.
Correct.
Consequently, if I pull from the fund balance for the operating budget, I'm still paying with today's dollars for the people who will live here 10 years from now.
Correct. Well, the hope is that we won't need to use the fund balance in the operating budget.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm only looking at, in some ways, looking at fund balance that I'm giving you all the credit because you've been here before me. You run it and run things efficiently enough that money has accrued.
Right.
At some point, you use it for something. We talked about
Right.
potentially for build
Yeah.
projects and making the financing easier for that. And that's probably a better use
Right.
at some point, so you're
And
not.
if we're talking fairness, if we overcharged people last year by $500,000.
Right.
Then the fairest thing is to get that $500,000
Back
Yeah,
in.
Mondays
Yeah,
can-
okay.
So that's the other side of it as far as, I mean, like, I understand, I'm not, to be clear, this is not something that I'm like banging on the table.
No, I
about.
understand. It's an interesting way to look
But I
at it.
do look at it that way,
Yeah.
that's my co-op training.
Yes.
I have a different question.
Yep.
What was between scenario 1 and 2, how did you choose those amounts, the 374 versus the 9 something?
That's what we were just talking about.
Okay.
I didn't even think to ask that question.
So for the 374, we just picked a couple of the smaller projects, and then there were 3 that were supplemental, which were projects that were already in the works, that we kind of had to make up for the deficit for. So that's where, that was made up of the senior center HVAC, the Matheson Park playground, and,
Yes, there was still a deficit
Some left over, yeah.
from that project.
But not to beat that horse, but like, so the next 10 years of people enjoying the playground, the next 10 years of people using the senior center and enjoying that, you know, if we paid off the fund balance, it's the people now paying it for the people who move here in 5 years and get the benefit of that, they didn't pay for that. Yeah. I'm sorry, I'll stop saying that, it's just.
No,
So it's a combination of smaller projects plus making up some projects that were over budget in the last couple of years. I mean, that's essentially what you just
right,
summarized.
and then, in scenario 2, at last work session, we threw out the idea of potentially using $1 million of fund balance, so this was just as close as I could get.
I
for
got it, and then you
985.
sort of, I think what we ended up doing is, I think it was the truck or the stage, something rolled forward into the next year that was why we were grasping at that nice round number. But you've given me a better approach, which is maybe I don't take anything for this, because I get to do it anyway if I draw it, if we really needed it in the operating budget, because debt service had increased. It won't be obvious that it's for debt service, because it's really for the whole budget, and it'll be allocated accordingly. Not that I'm trying to hide anything.
I'm not against
Yeah.
making the 300,000 a small amount, because it's a way to reinvest the overage that we, you know, but you understand my point.
Yeah.
Although I think if you have, for the 9 something, although I hear your argument about, you know, you're sort of like taking it for the future, but you could also think about it a little bit differently, which is we have about $7 million in fund balance. Of all this money that we've accumulated from the people who have lived here and paid taxes.
Absolutely.
That's a pretty big number that it probably is appropriate, I think, to give, to not borrow, right? If you can get away with not borrowing that million, especially in the environment that we're in, it's probably good because rates are probably gonna go down in the future. So our future borrowing will be less expensive. Yeah.
But the only thing about that is just, I don't disagree with what
Yeah.
you just said, obviously, I mean, that there's no one, like I said, I wasn't banging the table, it's just like the way to look at it. But the one thing about that is that we have reasons, this board does, I know that there are numbers that are supposed to be like what a healthy fund balance looks like, and this is too much and this is too little. But this particular board has discussed on several occasions, keeping a healthy fund balance, because in the future, we do have some major projects coming up, and you know, and there is some uncertainty and things like that, so it's better to have that cushion, and so that's what, it's not sitting there unused, it's sitting there to allow us to do things going forward. But yes,
I mean-
Yeah,
Marlene's
as I-
right, we're
yeah.
doing it on people's money.
Well,
I mean-
except the counter to that is the money is earning interest,
That's true.
which can offset the interest that you pay on the bonds. It's not enough. I think you earn less than,
No, not.
no?
No,
You get-
well, we borrow at tax exempt rates.
Oh. Yeah,
And we
yeah,
invest
which,
at taxable rates. It's called arbitrage.
yeah, I got it.
But yes, that's, when the market, when there's normal interest rates in the market like there is now.
Yeah.
And there hasn't been for
Yeah.
10 years, right?
Right.
When there's normal market rates, we are,
We take our
Our-
CDs.
yeah, which
Yeah.
is what we did. And our borrowing rate is at a tax exempt rate, which is,
Right, you're not a
As you know, it's
taxable
lower.
entity, so you're doing, right?
right, if a corporate borrowing is 7%, we're gonna borrow at 5%. Or whatever that
Yeah.
differential is between municipals.
But
Yeah.
you have market, interest rates like for the CD, so it's like, you're getting an interest of like 5.
Our CD's 5%, and currently our liquid cash is earning over 5%.
Right, well, because the market's inverted right now.
Yeah, I mean, this won't last forever,
No,
but
of
for the
course.
next year, your argument can be turned upside
Yeah.
down. You will be right in about a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, my
Yeah.
other thought though is that even when we're conservative, our fund balance has been going up.
yeah,
So I feel
I
like,
don't have to even speak,
Yeah.
Marlene saying everything.
I think it's why I would go with,
The last 8 years.
I go with the lower amount and see and in the next year's operating budget, then I can drop more in if I have to, or if I have to in the capital budget, because that, you got the stage coming forward. I'm not guaranteeing that that's happening, but, and you have a fire truck coming forward for $1 million next year. And then you'll layer other things on it.
our capital, but the borrowing last year was what? I'm being lazy to like not flip through.
It
Two.
was a little over 4%, but then we got a premium, so in effect it was around, it came out to about 3.8%.
You're asking a rate or amount? Amount
The
is
amount we borrowed,
2.15.
2.15 and this borrow is 5.
point something.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge difference.
Can you remind me, I ask this every year, what New York State says the range is that we ought to have in fund balance?
We've been told over the years that 25% of your general fund budget is considered full, excess, beyond that's excess.
Yeah, so
And
we're
We're
probably,
about
about
32.
We're about that.
And if we took $1 million out, we'd be at,
6 something.
Yeah, break out the
right, I
calculator.
think we'd probably be at about 27 or.
Probably.
Around there, yeah.
So we'd still be over
Yeah.
what New York State says we should be doing. And we would be borrowing $1 million less.
Yeah, I'm kind of.
I'm just throwing it out there.
That's-
Where do I
Every year.
find,
But then we don't get the interest on that million for the next year, right? That's
Yeah, but
the-
we have people's money for a long, like, it's a
Yeah,
lot of money for a long period of time.
where do I find I think you have it by year, right? The borrowings for next year?
Yes.
Which, doesn't matter, well, it
Doesn't matter. I mean, I guess it does, but.
Right, all right, hold on.
To look at is what the fund balance is
Yeah,
over
not
the
that
last
much.
Yeah.
10 years.
Wow,
Yeah, well, but,
You'll see it keeps going up
I
every year,
understand
even though
what
we
you're
keep
saying.
taking it out.
Yeah.
That's this year, right?
That facilities committee is meeting right now.
well, what I was
Is it-
curious
is it the
about
schedule?
is how much of
And it goes
a,
up.
It was
Yeah. No,
project
but-
or future borrow.
next year,
What the,
next year you have projected, and I gotta see what these column headings are now.
it's 127, so
Bond cost.
debt service this year, oh, sorry, you're looking for
Well,
actual.
bonded cost is $6 million next year. I know we don't have to accept all the projects,
Yeah, yeah,
but,
yeah.
so it's going up again.
Additions.
Yeah,
So we're over fund balance.
And by the way, with climate change, we're gonna have a lot of this water type related stuff going
Yeah.
forward.
I'm not,
Yeah.
I don't feel super strongly we're having a debate here,
No.
because there's no right answer and no wrong answer here.
I certainly don't feel strongly about it, like I'm not gonna be
Yeah.
upset whatever we decide.
One thing Larry and I were whispering about before is this year, I mean, we're still ironing out the numbers because we just came to year end, but we'll likely have a surplus this year. So we could potentially use whatever we're projecting to have as a surplus for this year towards capital projects.
How soon you think you'll know?
Not Monday,
Yeah,
but
I get it. Well,
She has the auditors coming.
when do we
in.
have to adopt the capital budget by? I think that's kind of an open-ended thing,
It's
right?
open-ended, yeah. I
So
mean,
we could do it in July, and you could tell me, us, that we got this much more in surplus?
right, yes.
I mean, maybe I hate to do this, but punt. I think all of us could probably, without feeling too badly, walk away with either scenario 1, scenario 2, or
In
what's,
between.
or the box behind Carol Merrill, which is what actual surplus is for this year.
I mean, do you have any idea what's?
For those not
I don't
old
wanna
enough
put
to
you on
know,
the
that was
spot,
Let's
but
Make a
like-
Deal reference.
It's hard to say, I
Let
wanna,
me rephrase the question. Will it be an actual amount of money or is it gonna be like $100?
no, it'll be an actual amount of money.
Okay, all right. No, $100 would be a surplus.
in other words, is it worth talking about?
Like, Sam and Katie made us pay for $100.
That's, so we essentially, we got 3 options here. And yes, I could go for either one of these 2, since my own notes actually, whatever I wrote down in advance was with you. And then I changed my mind while I'm looking at this. So, yeah, I mean, look, if by some miracle you have it Monday, great. If not, let's plan to put this to bed at like the first meeting in July, because you can tell us in advance what you got as added surplus. And who knows, if it's several $100,000, going to the 900 number here is not a big deal, because you were already, even at the low number, you were gonna go 350. Okay,
Agree with that.
all right.
One quick question, one of the items this year was the DPW office windows. Was that the thing to make it so that it's more energy efficient? The DPW office windows, $25,000. I'll explain why I'm even asking if people want, but.
That was not the energy efficiency project that I'm aware of.
It's a separate project.
No, that one's actually the one that you might be referring to is the emissions reduction project, which is the one where we are taking a boiler out of service and, doing working.
That's
Yeah,
right. I
that's
thought that the windows were part of that whole.
It's a separate project. This one's, they're just requesting new windows.
Because they're.
I don't know the details of the project,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
We can get more information from them.
All right.
Okay. So should we switch to the deer stuff? Okay. My goal in this is really just to give everybody an update on whatever's going on, and then we can see where it goes. I'm stating the obvious to say that I think the majority of the board was in favor of using a single bow hunter, although we may vary in how enthusiastically we might be willing to do that. And the 2 of us, Larry Lonke and I, met with Peter Kelly, who was the experienced bow hunter that had been recommended by some of the folks that we talked to. He referenced what he talked about as basically a 5-year plan, and then segueing to somebody that he could select and train as an unpaid hunter. I'm not pretending that I know what's gonna happen 5 years from now, but if that is possible, and I think it probably is, that's not a bad way to go because it saves expenses. The Woods Committee was tasked with figuring out how to measure reforestation. They have come back to us and asked for a consultant who does this professionally. At least one of you was on the phone with me with Danielle Bagley-Miller. And she ran the T-Town Deer program and then has her own forest management solution. I think she's also got, I don't have it in front of me, but her bio showed education in the area of forestation and so what I sent all of you at the last minute, and I apologize for that, but you're not being asked to make any decisions about it, were 2 proposals that had come from the Woods Committee One was from the hunter and one was from Danielle Bagley Miller. Danielle Bagley Miller's was talking about reforestation consulting, if you will, measurement consulting. And the thought is, and I think her price was $12,000, to help the Woods Committee design a program that they can then run thereafter, which will tell us whether or not we're making any progress. The Hunters program, he had 3 levels. The Woods Committee recommended the most aggressive / expensive level. They varied from 40 to 47,000 to 57,000, and we just want to open them up. And they involved a range of things. The basic and least expensive was, oops, sorry, wrong one. Eventually I'll find it, sorry. All right, may not. Oh, you got it? Maybe that is the one. Hold on. This one.
Yeah, that's it.
The
That's
KDN.
it.
Okay.
Yeah, first he says
He
all
goes
the
through
things
all
you
this
said to
stuff.
do.
Okay. All right, got it. Okay. So it involves a range of things, the sort of digital and on-site scouting, mapping of the property and deer movement, cellular camera deployment, data analysis, hunting strategy, entrance and exit routing, and so on. And the most basic, which was the $40,000 one, is 1 hunt a week and removal and donations, and the moderate program added appearance at meetings, some reporting, and the aggressive program had all of what I've described, but more accelerated hunting. I think it was 2 a week. If I was going to pick from among these, I would probably pick the middle or the basic, since I'd like to see what happens from the results. But I'm not making a judgment. Nobody's making a judgment at this exact moment. Let's see. The other thing to note is none of these are guarantees of success. So it might be more interesting. In other words, they're out there hunting. He's been successful before, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee results. It guarantees time spent, which is why, to me, a basic or moderate program might be a better choice. I'm going to switch for a second to the drone that we tried to do. Apparently, it's just too late in the season. The guy went out, he tried to do it, he was not able to he saw a deer, but he said he couldn't give us a reliable count. So if he's going to do it, it's going to have to happen post-hunting season, probably, when the leaves are down. So in my mind, obviously we're going to talk about all these things, but the next step would be to pick a plan when you've had the opportunity to look at this thing from the hunter's proposals. And if we're going to put something on a board agenda, it would be something like authorizing the village administrator to negotiate a contract based on the particular plan we selected from the bow hunter, or we can ask him to mix and match. And the forest measurement description, authorizing the village administrator to negotiate a contract for that. And on the meeting when we vote on these contracts, Larry would then take those, negotiate them, and then bring the contracts back to us to approve. At that meeting, when we're approving the contracts, I would want to discuss with the hunter, with Danielle Bagley Miller, signage, timing, the season, notice to the Irvington Police Department, public education. I mean, the Woods Committee is going to have to be here too. Talk about all of the rest of the details that are associated with that before I had to vote on this. And I know a lot of those things are being worked on now, but I would want to hear some of the details before that happens. So I'm gonna take a deep breath, and I know I'm being somewhat unfair because I sent you this thing like 2 hours ago and told you, don't read it. So I do not expect you to comment on it at this moment, but does that sound like a reasonable plan, giving you folks the opportunity to read what you got, to voice an opinion as to, what you think about what you're seeing, and then we can try to put on an agenda something that says, Larry, go figure out, with the village attorney, how to negotiate a contract based on these general terms with these two parties. Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna ask, have we determined that we can hire this specialist without having to go out to bid?
I don't know that I can get you an answer, 100%. We can't ask the state controller's office or anything like that.
Yeah.
I mean, we haven't asked the village attorney to do research on it yet. We will, but my sense anyway is that it's a professional service. I don't see how that's any different than hiring, well, the measurement person is clearly a professional.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a service contract from that standpoint. I don't see how that would be any different.
Well, and if you backed out the bow hunting aspect of this, everything else he's doing is consulting. It's, I'm gonna scout out, I'm gonna map this, I'm gonna see which way the wind is going, I'm gonna track the deer. It's not much different than the other piece, and then the question is the hunting a specialized professional service? And I think you could probably argue, yes, particularly given his background.
Right.
Of having done that and having run the programs.
Right.
So I think sort of the next step is to give everybody a chance to look at what they got. And this is not a non sequitur, but it's a total 180. When I spoke to PETA, they asked me to speak to somebody from, I think it's the New York Humane Society, who wanted to talk about how to do a program differently. The guy just dropped off the face of the earth and suddenly sent an email earlier this week saying, hey, I'm available on Thursday and Friday. I wrote him back immediately, said, I'll talk to you tomorrow at 10 to 10:30. He still hasn't confirmed. I will call him at 10 o'clock tomorrow and talk to him. I don't think he's gonna change my mind, but as a courtesy, since I said I would talk to him, I will do my best to get him to speak to me.
What's the contract thing you would do for deer management? Would it just be 1 year?
Yes, I'm sorry, I should have said that, yes. They're 1-year contracts. I think if we're making a decision about it, not that we have to commit ourselves to do this, but we should be making the decision that this is a sort of a 5-year expense. So as you look at these proposals, consider, is this something you want to add to our expenses for the next 5 years?
I think even after the 5 years, even if we did get a volunteer hunter, I think there's a lot more of the management that we would have to pay someone to do, or volunteers to do, so I don't think the cost will drop to zero, like there would be some
I think
cost.
that's fair. Yeah, I think you can lessen the cost, but it was interesting to me and probably to you that the gentleman, Peter Kelly, who came, was not saying, yep, this is an annuity for life for me, I'll be here every year. He said, I'm going to do this, we'll change the impact of the deer on the woods, and at a point in time, I'm gonna back out of it, and I will help you select somebody who's an amateur, I don't mean amateur like doesn't know what they're doing, I mean somebody who will not be paid, but is a skilled hunter who could do this like he does it. That doesn't mean it'll go to zero, because they'll still.
Right, well, this is, Danielle she was managing those volunteer hunters at T-Town, right? I mean, that was a big
Yes.
part of her job.
Correct.
Um,
Yeah, yes, that is a fair point. There has to be somebody who's willing to coordinate with, now she had a whole crew of people, so they really needed a professional there.
Right.
There has to be someone who's willing to coordinate with this one person, which is part of the, okay, before we even have a vote on the contract, I want the Woods Committee sitting here and I want anybody else who's relevant, so that we can say, okay, I know you don't have all the answers, and that's a little like how we started with Rocktoberfest. I know you don't have all the answers now, but tell me how you're gonna get to those answers. So that we know that this will be done smoothly. So that is, I don't know if anyone has other questions or comments or whatever, and I recognize this is, you know, in a perfect world, not something everybody would be choosing to do, but I think it, well, enough said. We had this debate already at another meeting, so I won't belabor the point.
So the question is, do you think something should be on the agenda for Monday to do what you suggested, which is to basically just, you know, direct?
Yeah, I think we could have the discussion, well,
Or not, I mean,
it's an interesting question. Do people think they could come back to me to tell me I guess by Friday, which option they think? Because
No,
we
it
can,
doesn't be Friday. No, I think you can attach, since you're gonna be talking about it, you can
Yeah.
attach the two proposals to the agenda. But you don't have to, you can.
So is
you can
your
take the agenda item to debate the
which choice to
course,
make?
yeah, exactly.
That's fine, yes. We can, that would be the public
So Monday-
meeting, which
but it
we
would be
sort of
Monday.
decide on the course.
Right.
And then it probably goes, I mean, if we immediately came to a decision, I suppose we could craft a resolution on the spot that says I'm authorizing you to go negotiate this, especially because it's not finality, you still have to come back with the contracts. Okay, that's fine. Okay. Anybody else? Anyone else want to bring up another matter? Okay, then I will make a motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.